What's that? Yes.
Hi, everyone. We will be getting started pretty soon, but just ask your patience as we get things set up.
Can you hear me now, Will?
I can.
Good. Okay,
So
good.
I think Craig had a phone call that he had to take really quickly, but then we can get started.
Okay. Is Ben Kalos here? Do you know? Do we know?
He is. I believe he is. Somebody named Ben Kalos is here.
Okay. So why don't we start the meeting and let's call a meeting to order, the March meeting of the Transportation Committee of Community Board 8. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting. I'm Chuck Warren, co-chair, and Craig Lader, my other co-chair. Glad to see everybody. And first, before we get started, I know that we have our council member Ben Kalos here, and I know he's limited in time, so I'd like to ask Ben to we'll unmute Ben, and if he'd like to say a few words, and he should go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you to Transportation Co-Chair Chuck Warren and Craig Lader. I want to thank both of you for your leadership of this committee. And we have subtitles. That is not the least bit disconcerting. And I just want to thank all of you because as we move forward in this future, with the reality of climate change, we need to get more people out of vehicles. We need to get more people onto public transportations, walking, biking. It is all part of the solution. So I want to thank you for all the work that you've been doing. When I got elected, we had one protected bike lane on First Avenue, one crosstown pair in the 90s. I actually live on the crosstown pair. And we see a lot of, and I see Rita Popper here who lives on a crosstown pair. Chuck Warren lives on the crosstown pair. A lot of people live with a bike lane right in front of their house and seem to be getting along with that. And ultimately, for me, my goal is I don't want to see anybody else die from a preventable traffic collision. So that means making it safer for people to cross the street, to ride a bike, to drive a car, and keep people from getting killed by cars, because it happens every day. If you live in my district, one of the most likely causes of death, it's not gun violence, it's not even asthma rates or things like that, it's cars. So trying to keep everyone safe from cars. So also, as we are living through this pandemic, more and more people are taking bikes. So one thing I did want to speak in favor of is adding bike parking I'd love to see more creative bike parking from DOT, the types of bike parking that are protected from the elements, even some that provide added security. When I first got elected, we did a street survey and we asked people to identify locations for bike parking. And then we've worked with restaurants and building owners to place it. And we have a pretty much unlimited number of those circular pieces from the Bloomberg administration that's still left over. So any place we can put bike parking, I'm in favor of and would love to see it get better. And then I also wanted to just thank DOT and the community for coming out to talk about the 61st and 62nd crosstown bike lanes. We've added it to 77th Street and 78th Street. We've also added it to 70th and 71st. We still have it at 90th and 91st. We still need a crosstown lane, and while we have DOT here, I will again ask for crosstown passage in the 80s, but we do need it in the 60s. We were able to create a safe crossing across the Queensboro Bridge thanks to the support of the Community Board 8 Transportation Committee, and also we've made improvements on First Avenue. And so we've seen the test at 61st and 62nd with that going in temporarily. I'm hoping that folks feel heard from DOT and that folks have been listened to and that they've been able to change the number of lanes of traffic. I've visited on site myself. I've met with Commissioner Ed Pinkart. I brought the borough president there. And my hope is that any concerns have been addressed. If we need to remove more parking, when I was there, I saw a lot of medical parking placards. And if there's parking placard abuse on the block, we can work with the 19th precinct to make sure that we have more enforcement and open up more travel lanes. If there is too much parking on the block, we just need to move more flow. I'm open to hearing from the community about how we can do that. Ultimately, the goal is to make sure that we do have safe ways for folks to get across town. So I just wanted to speak in favor. I want to thank the committee for doing this hard work and for everyone for coming out. I have to hop on to the next event, but I will tell you I do First Friday every month, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. We just sent out an invite. It's going to be March 5th, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I'm happy to hear from you. I've also done Ben in Your Buildings for numerous buildings on 61st and 62nd. And I think one of the things folks were talking about was that if there was another place to do it in the 60s, which we really haven't found yet. And we've tried to make sure we heard any concerns around creating some dwell locations, which I'm hoping has been resolved. So I want to thank everyone and just wanted to come out with my support and thank the community board for all of your hard work on this.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Okay. Why don't we get to the first item on the agenda? I want to mention something before we started. We've got 100 people at this point signed in, and I know there are a lot of people here for that item. And this committee in general has not put time limits on, but if we have, seeing that we have so many people who may want to speak on this item, we're going to have to try to limit the statements to 2 minutes. And because once we hear from the public, we have to hear from the board to see whether or not the board wants to take any action based on what's going on here on this item. So, let's get to the first item, and this is DOT is going to present their proposal, or at least where they are in their proposal, to install crosstown protected bike lane on 61st and 62nd Street and create new bike connections to the Queensboro Bridge and the Manhattan waterfronts. And so why don't we have the DOT folks, I assume they're here, and unmute them and make a presentation, and then we'll hear from the public afterwards with questions or comments.
Yeah, as Ed gets unmuted, I just want to really quickly, I know there's a lot of people here for maybe their first time. If it is your first time at one of our Community Board 8 committee meetings, you'll notice that you're muted and you're not able to unmute yourself. The way that you will engage during the meeting is when the presentation is over, The co-chairs, Chuck and Craig, will call on you by name. You'll have to use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. I see there are people already doing that. I'm gonna actually like lower your hands until the presentation starts because it is a little bit distracting and hard to find the speakers. So if you're on the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Once they call on you, you'll see a little prompt pop up on your screen to unmute. The faster you do that, the faster we get through the meeting. The chat is only for technical support for Zoom. It is not to air your opinions. The co-chairs and the presenters will not see the things you put into the chat. It is only for technical support. If you're using an older version of Zoom, the way you'll find the raise hand button is through the participants menu. And then with that, I think Ed, you muted yourself, so give me 1 second to unmute you. So, Commissioner Pinkar, whenever you're ready, unmute yourself.
Borough Commissioner Ed Pinkar. Ed, welcome.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Chuck and Craig. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ed Pinkar. I muted myself because I have 9-month-old twins, and I'm just constantly in the habit of hitting mute when they start to get a little fussy. So I apologize for any background noise while I'm talking. I'm joined tonight by members of my staff and members from our bicycle unit to come and show tonight a permanent proposal for protected bicycle lanes on 61st and 62nd Street. We have been discussing the temporary project that we implemented last year with many of you. There have been conversations that reflect some of the pros and cons of the temporary lanes. We begged your patience during that period because we knew, although we wanted to do something very quickly as we aided the city's recovery to COVID, that it was really only an interim measure and that we could design a fuller project that would account for many of the questions and concerns we've heard from individual property owners along this time. So tonight we want to show what a full corridor treatment would look like. If you haven't participated in the project review process previously, this is certainly not the end of our discussions with the community, but quite honestly, just the beginning. We know there are many stakeholders along both corridors who have particular concerns and needs. You have our commitment that we'll continue to work with all of you individually to try to address some of those concerns. That includes some special uses, daycare and dialysis center, several of the open restaurants along the corridor, and my office is always ready, willing, and able to participate in those discussions. Tonight, I believe Paula Rubira from our bike unit will actually lead the presentation, but then the team and I will, of course, be ready to answer any questions you may have. So thank you in advance for your participation, and we look forward to working together on this project.
Hi, could I actually share my screen, please?
All right, yes, go ahead. You can do it now.
Okay, good night, everyone. My name is Paula. I'm a senior project manager with the bike unit. I'm gonna walk us through, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with, okay, I think I'm gonna have to start this over. Sorry. Okay, I am not really sure why I can't. Okay, there we go. So just a little bit of outline of the presentation. I'll walk us through the presentation, starting with the background information. We'll go through the proposal and then our making it work section. There's a lot of information on the presentation. I hope we'll clarify some of the questions that have come up, but of course, we're always happy to answer questions at the end. So the map on the right shows the bike network in Community Board 8. The only protected bike lanes are on 1st and 2nd Avenue. As Councilmember Kalos mentioned earlier, there are a few pairs of crosstown standard lanes, but there's really nothing on the east-west bike facilities in the 60s. In 2015, Community Board 8 passed a resolution asking the DOT to provide a network of crosstown bike routes on the Upper East Side using the safest appropriate design. Councilmember Kalos again requested crosstown protected bike lanes in the district. I want to talk a little bit about our cycling numbers. Comes to no surprise to anyone that cyclists has increased dramatically over the past few years. A few data points I would like to highlight: almost 1/4 of New Yorkers ride a bike regularly, and 15% of New Yorkers reported using City Bike. Between 2019, 2020, there's 26% increase in ridership on the Queensboro Bridge. That's the highest percent increase of any of the East River bridges. 68% increase in ridership on 2nd Avenue, and 12% increase in city bike trips in Community Board 8. And that's when many New Yorkers are not commuting to work and school. A little bit of information about our Green Wave plan. As I mentioned, New York City has experienced a significant increase in cyclists. Unfortunately, back in 2019, we saw an increase in cyclist fatality. There's almost 3 times as many fatalities that year than the previous year. So in response, in July 2019, DOT released the Green Wave Plan. This is a vision document that guides the expansion of the protected bike lane network with a minimum of 30 miles of protected bike lane per year. Basically, the plan calls for better street redesign. They're data-driven, as well as education and outreach. Then 2020, we're making some progress on Green Wave, and we shift gears slightly to respond to the pandemic. I think it's true across the board, but COVID really forced us at DOT to rethink and reshape our public space and do that quickly. The rollout of COVID responsive programs, including the temporary bike lanes, as you can imagine, look very different than what our usual approach and process is. And that is all aspects of including project development, outreach, and implementation. It was very challenging, very little resources, and no access to our usual toolbox. A little bit of a timeline for the temporary bike lanes on 6162. So DOT installed temporary bike lanes citywide along critical connectors from already established protected bike network. Since the early month of the pandemic, there was a significant increase in cycling across the Queensboro Bridge and the neighborhoods on both sides of the river. So DOT installed temporary bike lanes on Norton Boulevard and Crescent Street on the Queens side and 6162 on the Manhattan side. Both of the temporary lanes in Queens are being made permanent. Crescent Street was actually fully implemented late last year. Of course, it's not without challenges. We made the changes that we could at the time. Again, we did not have access to all the resources that we usually do. And we basically heard from you, had this time to hear from you, and some of the things that we heard were incorporated in the design that we're proposing tonight. So one of the questions that came up is the route selection. So big picture, as part of the City Council's master plan, DOT is mandated to expand the protected bike lane network significantly. There's a link at the bottom of the page with more information on the master plan. I encourage you to take a look at it. And then also as part of our Green Wave plan, one of DOT's goals was to provide crosstown bike lanes every half mile. We've been working south of 59th Street at this point on a comprehensive plan. And we have since installed protected bike lanes on 12 and 13, 26, 29, 50 to 55 since 2018. And we're wrapping up implementation on 30 and 39 Queens Midtown Tunnel in the spring. Every street, every block presents challenges, but also presents opportunities. And 61, 62 are important corridors in the transportation network. It makes the same crucial connections, whether you're traveling by car, bus, walking, or you're biking. It provides the important connections to the protected bike lane network, including the Waterfront Greenway, the Queensboro Bridge, and Central Park. It also avoids bus and truck routes and wider blocks east of 2nd Avenue to accommodate the existing traffic. So a summary of the safety data: 61, 62 are in the Vision Zero priority area. These corridors rank top 10% of killed or severely injured in all of Manhattan. Just to give you an idea, 342 people have been injured, including 27 severely and 1 pedestrian killed in the past 5 years. And again, since 2020, 24 cyclists have been killed citywide. Now we jump into the benefits of protected bike lane. I just want to talk a little bit about this. Our focus is always to prioritize safety and street improvement projects. We have data going back several years at this point and found that street redesigns that include protected bike lanes are a very effective tool. It's not only about the protected bike lanes, but also all the other design elements that are included when we install these bike lanes. The largest reduction in injury was actually among pedestrians. Those were down by 21% where protected bike lanes were installed. And I want to mention this again, it's really important. This is a Vision Zero priority area, and any street redesign will focus on providing safer facilities for pedestrians and cyclists. So now we jump into the proposal. This is our typical design for 30 feet wide streets. We're basically proposing to install curbside delineator protected bike lane along the north curb. This just creates that dedicated space for cyclists in the roadway. It better organizes everyone. All the users have their separate dedicated facilities. We're also looking at individual intersections along the corridor for pedestrian safety improvements. That will likely include update signal time, dedicated turn lanes, pedestrian painted space, offset crossings, and then finally curb management. We're working with our parking unit on a comprehensive curb regulation plan for more efficient curb usage and to maximize the vehicular flow. So this is the proposal for, typical proposal for a 34-foot wide segment. These blocks are a little bit wider than the ones that we just look at. The proposed design here calls for a curbside parking protected bike lane. In this case, we're able to maintain parking on both sides of the street. And same as before, we're looking at every single intersection along those corridors and on a curb regulations plan with our parking unit. So this is east of 2nd Avenue, a little bit different than what we just talked about. As you know, these blocks east of 2nd Avenue carry more traffic. So the proposal here is to, for these two blocks, 61st and 62nd Street between 2nd and 1st Avenue, to include a curbside bike lane, one travel lane, and a rush hour lane along the south curb that accommodates the higher volumes east of 2nd Avenue. It's similar to previous conditions where parking is allowed during the off-peak hours. This is just a photo of our typical design. On the left, you see a curbside buffered bike lane, and then on the right, a parking protected bike lane. So here we jump from 61st and 62nd to 60th Street between 1st and York. This is an adjustment to the temporary bike lanes. We're connecting cyclists on 61st, 62nd, to 1st and 2nd Avenue bike lanes, which is really important. But for this last block between York and 1st Avenue, we're proposing to provide that connection on 60th instead of 61st and 62nd. And we're doing that by installing a two-way protected path on the south curb. This allows for us to provide the connections to the Waterfront Greenway. And this is something that we always wanted to do, but weren't able to do in a temporary manner. So the next couple of slides is how we tie everything together and provide the connections from the Queensboro Bridge to the crosstown lanes. As you probably all know, the shared path on the Queensboro Bridge funnels everybody to 1st Avenue and 60th Street, which creates a little bit of a friction, all the users traveling in various directions. We want to alleviate that. We're working with our bridges division on the final design, But basically the goal is to provide access at the base of the path. We want to do that by installing a all-way stop sign, opening the path gate to Queensboro Bridge exit road, and install pedestrians and bicycle crossings to formalize the existing desire line. We understand this is a super tricky spot. We want to make sure that the design works. And of course, we'll continue to monitor, knowing that we're likely to revisit once we start talking about the South Outer Roadway opening to pedestrians in the future. This is the connection between the Queensboro Bridge Path, 61st and 62nd. To fully connect the cyclists coming off the Queensboro Bridge to the crosstown routes, we're proposing to install bike stamps on the alleyway adjacent to the bridge that connects 61st to 62nd. You can see the picture on the left of the treatment we're proposing, and then a two-way path along the west curb on the Queensboro Bridge exit road between 60th and 61st Street. This will provide the north-south connection to and from the Queensboro Bridge to the crosstown lanes. So now our Making It Work section, I want to talk a little bit about the things we heard and how we can make it work. So basically, from everything we heard, the majority falls into three categories: requests for bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements. So we're addressing that by providing the protected bike lanes from Fifth Avenue to York Avenue and redesigning of the intersections. We heard from a lot of people, curb access is also important. We're going to continue to work with stakeholders to accommodate specific needs. The daycare center, medical facilities, the dialysis center, also maintaining emergency vehicle access. Our proposals are reviewed and approved by FDNY. And as I mentioned before, working with our parking unit on a comprehensive plan for the area to encourage higher turnover and improve curb access. Last but not least, traffic flow. Safety is our #1 priority, but maintaining traffic flow is important. So that is the reason why we're ending the crosstown lanes on First Avenue instead of York Avenue, to just accommodate the heavier traffic. We're maintaining 2 travel lanes east of 2nd Avenue and installing intersection treatments with permanent materials, including dedicated turn lanes, offset crossings, signal timing changes to improve the traffic flow and facilitate enforcement. Just a summary of benefits: we're trying to provide dedicated protected bike lanes, improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists, and create access, really a community amenity with these connections. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Paula, before we get to questions, can you make this presentation available to the board and to Will, so that we can put it online so people can take a look at it then, and they'll see what.
Absolutely, yes. We will post it online tomorrow morning, and then Colleen will probably send you the link in the early hours of the morning, before noon, hopefully.
Good, thank you. Great. Okay, good. Okay, so let's. Is there anything else that anybody wants to say from DOT before we go to questions at this point? Okay. All right. Why don't we start questions, and I have a bunch of hands that I can see, and will help me if there are ones that I haven't seen. First is Paul Crickler. Why don't we unmute Paul? And we're limiting try to keep the comments within 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, and Will's going to have a timer displayed, I believe, showing the 2 minutes.
Great, thank you very much. I'm hugely in favor of this proposal. I was really excited by many of the features that you outlined. So thank you very much, DOT, for this. As Ben Kalos said, it's not just climate change where we need to get people out of cars, but it's better for people to walk and bike around. It's also significantly quicker to get people out there on bikes for most journeys. It's a small place when you think about it, and it can be fun, although it's not really fun cycling in New York City these days. But All these things are true, and even more true with the pandemic. But what we need to have is a safe way for people to do these things, and we should want people to do these things more. If we build a safe infrastructure, more people will come. You can see it time and time again here in New York City, as well as everywhere else. One quick example is my son, Ben. We live on Roosevelt Island. He goes to see one of his friends outside in Riverside Park in the 80s. To get home on a city bike is really quick. He can zip across to the tram or to the F train at 63rd in about 10, 15 minutes. To use the bus across town and a subway down and another, it's a schlep. It's a 45-minute journey. And we should want this to be something that people do, but it's not safe. So I worry about him. And I can tell him not to do it, and I don't think it's safe, but he's 16, he's going to do it. So I'm asking not just for this one at 61st, 62nd, but I was very, very pleased to see in your slide something about every half mile protected bike lanes across town. Love to see them on 72nd, 79th, 86, 96, and 106. I know that Ben mentioned some crosstown lanes we have already, but I don't think those are protected. And that's it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Paul. Next is Devin Gould. Can we unmute Devin?
Hi, yeah, I am a resident of 62nd Street between 2nd and 3rd. Have been with my family there for about exactly 10 years. Also a former public member of this committee, and was on this committee when we passed the 2015 resolution asking for more protected crosstown protected bike lanes. I'm really glad that the DOT is implementing this board's resolution because bike lanes make everybody safer, and not just me and the people in our communities, but also the essential workers who deliver our food and packages. And I think that's really important that we build out a comprehensive bike network for that reason. My question, and not just on 61st and 62nd Street, I hope this is just the first of many pairs of protected bike lanes in our neighborhood. I have a couple of questions for DOT, which is, I mean, the real problem with these bike lanes is they're not protected enough. Having bollards every 20 feet is simply not enough to stop drivers from parking and biking in these lanes. So are they going to put real protection to keep drivers out of the lanes? And the other thing is that there's a food truck on 62nd Street and Madison Avenue, literally feet away from a commercial parking space on Madison Avenue. And yet they, every single day, well, 6 days a week, for about 12 hours a day, this food truck, Tony Dragon's Grill, chooses to park in the bike lane. Can we please have some better enforcement there and have a real plan to protect these bike lanes? Thank you.
Thank you. Paula, or does anyone from DOT want to answer the question about the protection and enforcement issue?
I'll chime in that we are working on looking at new barriers right now. Sorry, my name is Ted Wright. I run the bike program. Met a lot of you before, but we are looking at better barriers right now. You know, there are some budget constraints. I can't promise anything right now, but it's something that is also part of the Green Wave plan that Paula mentioned very gracefully, I might add. And hopefully we'll be able to do some more stuff in the future. Hold tight on that one.
And the enforcement issues that I know we've had a lot of comments on those.
The enforcement issue is flagged, and we'll follow up with the Manhattan office, or they'll follow up independently. It's great to know an actual location. That helps us. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Next is Eugene Weiss. Can we unmute Eugene?
Hi, yeah, I'm Gene Wise. I live on 62nd Street. Two main comments. Number one, we're all very concerned about safety, and with these increased expansion of the bike lanes, I think there are four things that have to be mandated. Number one, all these bikes, especially the motorbikes, have to have lights on the front and the back. Number two, they should be licensed like cars. So when they cause accidents, and I've seen 2 or 3 people be mowed down, they should be accountable when they hurt people. And that brings me to the third point. They should be having insurance, so people have recourse when they're hit. I have a friend that's got a concussion now from being hit by a bike. And I think they should also decrease the speed limit. They're going too fast. You say 30, 35, they go faster than that sometimes. It's very dangerous. So that has to be implemented. Now, my second area is that On 61st, 62nd, and 63rd, these are very, very heavily traffic streets, as you know, because they're the entrance and the exit to the FDR Drive and the bridge. If you want to, make congestion less, instead of funneling the bikes into the same streets that the cars are going, you should funnel them into 58th Street and 66th Street. And that would relieve the congestion. Thousands of people live in the high rise on these three streets. None of us want these bike lanes on these streets. There's too much noise, too much congestion. So I think you really should rethink about the exit streets that you're going to have these bikes go into. And I think having them on these streets is not well conceived. On 61st Street, there's a medical building with 100 doctors. Now there's nowhere for the accessorides to park. They have to park outside the bike lanes and block the street. On 62nd Street, there's a dialysis unit. Same problem, the dialysis delivery trucks are blocking the street. And in 63rd Street, they inadvisedly put in parking lanes.
There, we had to squeeze out of that. Does anybody, Ted, do you want to answer some of those issues?
I think Paula can address some of the direct issues, but first of all, it's a law that bikes do need lights, and the speed limit should be applied to bikes as well. Paula, maybe you could address some of the issues that you have.
Paula, before you start, just to clarify, the current traffic rules indeed require that all bikes have both bells and lights. All bikes must follow the same rules as motor vehicles, including the speed limit, which in Manhattan is 25 miles an hour on essentially every local street. And we do work very closely with our colleagues at the police department when we hear of particular problem areas. I'm not going to go too deep into some of the comments about licensing or insurance. Those would really be state actions. Eugene, I'm happy to get in touch with you. We can have a conversation offline about some of that. But for the design of this project, we do understand that there are some individual facilities that have different curbside access, and the dialysis center is one example where we think we're able to make an accommodation that will be able to work on that. So Paula, do you want to talk a little bit more about those details?
Yeah, so this is something that we've done in other crosstown routes. We hear from people, but we also reach out to stakeholders and we come up with different designs. We have a lot of things in our toolbox. What we presented here in a presentation is just their typical design, but we are looking to accommodate these specific needs with targeted designs. So yeah, we're happy to meet with all the stakeholders and talk specifics.
Okay, thanks. Next is Nina Oxman. Can we unmute Nina?
Hi there. My family has lived on 62nd Street between 2nd and 1st Avenue for around the last 25 years. The first thing I'd like to say is thank you for having this presentation and for showing this to us. My family is actually against the bike lane on 62nd Street and 61st Street. We're pro bike lanes in general. I'm a biker. I bike around the city, but on these particular streets is a poor choice for the crosstown bike lane. There should be another one. Someone suggested 66th. I thought about 64th, I think would be a good option for the same reason as mentioned before. This is a high traffic area. There's the entrance to the FDR, both south and north, funneled from 62nd. There's the exit from the Queensboro Bridge. And right by the exit, there is this dialysis center and there's the hospital on 61st. And I understand now that there may be some other plans, but we didn't see that today. The plans for rush hour won't work that I saw today because those accessorides are going to stop in the middle and they're going to be exiting people who are in wheelchairs or have trouble walking. And that's going to be a really big issue. And for that reason, we're against the 62nd Street bike lane. We want that to be somewhere else.
Thank you. Any comments from DOT on that, Ted, or anyone else?
One of the key things why we chose 61 and 62 is it directly links into the park and actually gets you to a place closer to 59th Street. And you actually have access on the east side, sorry, on the west side. As far as the east side, this plan is a lot different than what you saw. And we are trying to avoid a lot of the traffic lanes on 61 and 62, exactly what you just said, especially east of First Avenue. So we're trying to address that as best as possible, but also provide access where people need to go.
Thanks, Ted. Okay.
And I do, Chuck, if I could add, as we've been rolling out the bicycle lane network in Manhattan over the last few years, we've put bicycle lane projects like this on very similar blocks. Our crosstown experience over the last 3 years has been on 26th and 29th Street, on 12th and on 13th Streets, on 38th and 39th Streets. These are blocks where others raised similar concerns that they were too congested, traffic was too great, and we wouldn't be able to fit and still accommodate deliveries and passenger pickup and drop off. When we actually move forward with the work, we realize that we are able to do all of those things. So I certainly understand the concerns that you're raising, but when we think about other bike projects in Manhattan over the past couple of years, we've seen tremendous success, and we expect to see it on 61st and 62nd Street as well.
Okay, it's a really good point, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
There's a lot of great stuff on 13th, 26th, 29th, 12th, 38th, 39th, 52, and 55. If you want to come see some other similar streets that also have a lot of traffic on them.
Okay. Why don't we go to Don Zolan now? Can we unmute Don? Don, are you there?
Don, we can't hear you at all.
Is Don unmuted, but we can't hear him well?
Yeah, try unplugging your headset. Maybe it doesn't have a microphone on it.
Not now.
There you go.
Very good. We're rolling. I tell you what, I'm an attorney. I represent bikers on occasion. I used to ride a bike more. Bikes are great, but as I recall, when I was in law school, administrative law required there be in actions of the sovereign a weighing test, a balancing test, and I don't believe that the interests of the bike owners have been fairly weighed against automobile owners and the people who live in the area. So I live on 62nd. I agree with Ms. Oxman. I agree with Jean Weiss. These bike lanes, benefit bikers, but I was in the car today. 2 motorcyclists passed me in the bike lane, and a handful of delivery people passed me in the bike lane. But I was in the bike lane for about 10 minutes or 8 minutes between First Avenue and York Avenue before I could get onto the FDR. And the bike lanes cause backups. The bike lanes cause backups on the FDR, not on the FDR, on the 59th Street Bridge. So if I'm coming back from Queens, my ride is extended. I waste gas. I breathe hydrocarbons. It's bad for motorists. And there are motorists who can't do business in Manhattan because they can't get into Manhattan, all because we are favoring the bicyclists over everybody else. And I think that's unfair. And there's an economic impact. There's a health impact to the bike lanes. And what's most troubling is that this is a fait accompli. It's already been decided. So therefore, whatever I have to say, no one cares about. I'd like to know who cooked up this idea. Bike lane doesn't belong on 62nd, doesn't belong on 61st. It's ill-conceived and should be scrapped. I know you won't scrap it. Thank you very much.
Anybody from DOT want to comment?
Yeah, so if I could speak a little bit about it. So we, the design, the temporary design is very different than what we're able to do in a with our full toolbox available to us. So I think first of all, just going back, we did see last year, we have data before COVID and after we installed the bike lanes, and we did see the week after we installed the bike lanes, travel speeds went down because we did not accommodate the restaurant and there's only one traffic lane. That's changed now. We have 2 travel lanes, which we intend to maintain, and we're stopping the bike lane at First Avenue. There are a lot of right turns from First Avenue onto 62nd Street. So we realized that is not a good place for that. We're shifting everybody to 60th Street and accommodating 2 travel lanes, which was the previous condition.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Why don't we go to Hindi Schachter? Hindi, can we unmute Hindi?
And we're going to go in order the names appear in the participants menu. So waving at us is not going to get you called on faster.
Right. We have a list of hands and we're taking them in order. So Hindi Schachter is next. And then
Unmute yourself.
After Hindi.
And send, can you send it to my?
Do we have Hindi?
Your mom has.
Hindi, just unmute yourself whenever you're ready.
All right, good. All right, listen, have a nice birthday. And I hope to see you on the phone one of these days soon, okay? Okay.
So Hindi's not unmuting. Do you want to go to the next person?
Okay.
Yeah,
we can pick up Hindi if you can do again. We'll come back. Richard Ma, why don't we go to Richard Ma and unmute Richard?
Richard, just confirm unmuting on your screen. There you go.
Hi, everybody. So I live on 62nd, and I'm opposed to this bike lane. I've seen it firsthand. Ever since the bike lane was installed, the impact it's had on this block's traffic. With the dialysis center, with the bridge traffic coming off. Every time somebody tries to take a left on 62nd, the bikes don't stop. They just keep going. Right? They go super quick, as somebody mentioned before. They don't obey the speed limits. And beyond that, I mean, the people in my building, I have some very elderly residents in our building, and I've seen them try to actually get into like a car share, and the bikes don't stop for them. I saw one almost hit one of the older ladies that are in my building the other day. It's just a really bad idea to put this here. I know somebody mentioned, you've done this in other streets and said, it was perfectly fine. Yes, you can do it, but it doesn't mean that you should do it. And I assure you, if you talk to the residents in those neighborhoods, I'm sure that they would disagree with you. Again, as Don mentioned earlier, I'm sure you guys have, you're not going to scrap this plan. So it is what it is. There seems to have been very little involvement in terms of getting our input, or at least, being able to tell us exactly how you plan to mitigate any of this, right? The dialysis center, those trucks need to unload. Those ambulatory care vehicles need to unload their patients, right? There has been zero concrete actions or things that you've been able to show us that you're going to do to mitigate any of that. And like I said, I've been here for 15 years. The traffic is as worse as I've ever seen it. It's just nonstop honking. People are it's absolutely outrageous. And again, and also, like, why are we favoring the bikers? Yes, I mean, I totally agree. I'm a biker myself, but to put the needs of a couple of bikers beyond, everybody who lives in this neighborhood first. We were here for a long time before the bikers, right? And again, it just doesn't make any sense to me to do this.
Okay, thank you. Any comments?
Yeah, if I can share my screen really quickly again, please.
You're good.
Okay, give me 1 second. So we're actually been looking at speeds and travel time data. So we have data for 61, 62, 63, and 64, just to compare, make sure that the data looks good. This is in RICS. It's available publicly, so you guys feel free to take a look at it. But basically, this is the data that we pulled for these corridors, speeds. Before is the blue line, and then green is the after, before and after the bike lane. And it's the same for the travel times, where the travel times actually went down as well.
And so you're saying the travel times when the bike lanes are there were actually down a little bit from what they were before the bike.
Yes, yes.
And comparable or even more than the traffic on 63rd and 64th Street.
Yes, it's very comparable, yes.
I want to add that these are, it's a little bit odd to look at these things now because traffic numbers are all over the place, but the volumes on these streets have actually kind of remained the same. So we feel pretty confident in these numbers, given the fact that people's travel patterns have changed during COVID. I want to say also that we are putting curb access at the dialysis center in top priority, and there will be curb access there, just so everybody understands that.
Thanks. Okay, I saw Hindi before. Is Hindi?
Yes. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Great. I'm Hindi Schachter. I'm a senior citizen cyclist. I've lived in CB8 for over 50 years. I'm on the steering committee of Families for Safe Streets. You join Families for Safe Streets if you've lost a loved one in a traffic crash. I lost in 2014 my beloved husband of 47 years. In his memory, ever since then, I've been coming to CB8 and trying to get safe, sane streets. Mr. Weiss says you get safety by licensing cyclists, but all the evidence shows that the one thing that gets you the most bang for your buck in safety is street redesign, and that means protected bike lanes. So in memory of my husband, in anticipation of my own rides, I thank DOT for what they're doing on 61st and 62nd Street. I only hope they do it in all the other streets where we need protection. For example, on 72nd Street. I want my grandchildren who also live in this neighborhood to have safe streets, and protected bike lanes don't favor a minority, they favor all of us. They make it safer for car drivers. I drive a car, I have a license. They make it safer for pedestrians. And yes, they also make it safer for cyclists. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Thank you. Okay. Any comments from DOT? I don't know on that. Okay. Ted shook his head no. I saw that. Okay. Next is Liam Jeffries.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So first off, I want to get the praises out of the way real quick. I love this bike lane. This proposal. This is everything I dreamed about and more. Honestly, when DOT said they would put a bike lane on these streets, so this is great. I have a few comments related to the objectors to this bike lane because I've listened to all the arguments and I have a couple responses. For one thing, I've lived here all of my 22 years. I lived in my building on 3rd Avenue between 61st and 62nd Streets my entire life. The bike lanes have improved the streets tremendously. They are the safest I can ever remember them being. And I said this at the last meeting where this was brought up, but one of the reasons why is because when you have the bike lane on 61st Street where it is, it reduces the amount of drivers on 61st Street from the bridge who are jockeying for position to turn onto 3rd. And therefore, as a pedestrian, you have more leeway if you, for example, say, stand on the street to see if a car is coming or not. You know you're safe because you won't have to fear a car turning, making a wild turn on the 3rd Avenue. The second question is, there's a person who brought up the fact that this only benefits cyclists, and cyclists are a minority, and because they're a minority, they should not be treated. The bike lanes are not being proposed because they are a luxury. They are being proposed because without these bike lanes, they stand at a greater risk of death. Like the interest of the cyclists in this case is they want to live. And these bike lanes will make it easier for them to do that since they wouldn't have to be in the middle of traffic lanes like they were before the temporary bike lanes were put in. So those are my comments. agree with the lanes. And when cyclists are asking for these bike lanes, they're not doing it because it's a luxury. It's because it's a necessity for them to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Josh Rubinger. Josh, can we unmute Josh?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to do this call. I also want to thank a lot of the parties involved. I know people have done a lot of hard work on this. I've spoken on this issue with a lot of the people making the decisions. I've met with Ed and Ted and Paula and Colleen. And the first question I really sincerely ask is, I'm in favor of bikes. I think these bike lanes are imperative. I think they're great for safety. But all things being equal, looking at a map, I think this is the worst street to do it on for the reasons we've talked about ad nauseum. I don't know the streets like my friends at the DOT do, but 12th, 13th Streets, 38th and 39th, you got the Lincoln Tunnel, I get that, maybe 26, 27, 52, 55, they do not have this artery of the Queensboro Bridge and the FDR. So I think in all fairness, talking to our friends at the DOT, the default position should be we need a bike lane. The worst street is 62 and 61. So it would be the onus on you to say why these streets are imperative, which I've asked for. I've also discussed with our friends from the Dialysis Center, and we keep getting told, just wait till the meeting, you'll hear about our answer. Well, we've heard there will be curbside access from Ted, but I don't know what that looks like. And why this is so important is we have Judy Amar from the Dialysis Center on here tonight. I think she should be recognized. These people come out of treatment, and I can't even imagine what that treatment would be like. And to have a bike whizzing by when you're trying to get in your ambulance is probably horrific. And I've sent a picture to the DOT of the ambulance blocking the bike lane at maybe 3:10, and I went outside my building at 3:30, 20 minutes later, and the ambulance was still there. This is not going to be a quick load and unload. So the devil is really in the details. I think all these things should be addressed before these bike lanes proceed. I know that, you know, the trains left the station, but again, bike lanes are important. We need people's safety. And for all the bikers, for Hindi, don't you want your grandchildren to have a street that's not obstructed by an ambulette? Don't you want them not riding in the middle of the FDR traffic? Demand more of everyone on this call. We can come together and solve this. And I thank you and look for specifics.
Thank you, Josh. Any comment from D?
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly that I want Paula to show the design in a second here. I hope that's okay. And then secondarily, I do want to explain why this street important. It's very similar to the reason why it's important for vehicles. It is access to the bridge and access to 59th Street and the Park Loop roads that put cyclists already on these streets. If you go into Midtown to get now uptown, that's not as safe. You are crossing more intersections. If you're trying to get up to 72nd Street, there isn't a protected bike lane there. And if you're going directly across Midtown, maybe going to a job in the Midtown core, there are not that great of answers there. So this is actually the next component of these crosstown streets that is actually really important, just like driving a car, where you have a street grid where you can choose different cars. Cyclists need these things too, and they need to be given options that work from their paths. Just like cars, bicyclists get off on the ramp there that Paula talked about, so do pedestrians, and this will be an improvement to them. And I just want to reiterate that. I know it feels like an undue burden, but we have to deal with people all around the city on every street, and we have to think about how to use our streets in the best way. And this does work. Paula can get into the details of the design. I hope that's specific enough. And,
are you going to have two lanes of traffic and be able to unload the dialysis center? I mean, it's a very specific question.
Yes, that's what you're looking at right now. I just want to point that out on the screen. This is how it's going to work, similar to a bus stop and protected bike lanes in other portions of the city.
Okay,
same
so the bike lane
same
will be
as how it
south.
works on, hold on, same as how it works on Central Park West, same as how it works on 9th Avenue in Brooklyn. There's many places where we have to deal with this, and this is how the design would work. So, and I also just want to reiterate one more thing here. We've really gone way out of our way to preserve the lanes that are there right now. You know, we are not trying to block up traffic. We've removed a portion of the lane in order to make traffic work a little bit better. We hear you guys, and we have gone out of our way to try to make this work. And we have not done parking protected and limited the number of lanes on 61st or 62nd. We've left the same number of lanes there for a reason.
All right, thanks.
Very, and I hope you guys can.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Let's go. The next person is Anu. Can we unmute Anu?
Okay, hi. So I live on 62nd Street. I actually live on the second floor. So for me, bikes actually work really well because it would take away from the noise that comes from the street, from the cars. That being said, I'm against the bike lane being put on my street on 62nd Street. I have 3 very young children. And right next to our building, we have the Bright Horizons. It's a place for very young children, like a daycare or preschool. Because this lane is so heavily trafficked, going, with the cars coming off the Queensboro Bridge and the FDR, a lot of bicyclists are encouraged to come on the sidewalk. To me, that's very dangerous. I worry for my children. I worry for the other children. So my point is, why not 64th Street? This lane has everything possible going on in it. And why should we have a bike lane as well? It makes no sense. And I think you're compared it to, when in response to Josh, it was compared to Central Park West and 9th Avenue. These are avenues. Ours is a street. It's much narrower. We've got a lot of stuff going on here. So I really worry for my children's safety and the other children. If you're going to do this, you need to put very, very strict laws to make sure that the bicyclists don't come on the sidewalk. On Friday evening, there was a bunch of ATVs, the things that you see on the beach. They came on the sidewalk. It was crazy. So bicyclists and, whoever is using the bicycle lane feels that, the rules don't apply to them and they can do whatever they want. And it makes it very, very unsafe for the rest of us. So I really hope you would reconsider and move it out of our street. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Really quickly, that bike lanes, when there are bike lanes, people avoid the sidewalks. What we've seen, that is generally a fact, and why we build them, so people don't go onto the sidewalk. The Central Park and 9th Street, they are slightly wider than your streets, but they're also two-way. So we're faced with a limited amount of roadway. So the design that I was showing you earlier is actually very applicable because it's actually less space than you have on your street because there's a double yellow line splitting the 2 directions of the roadway, just to clarify.
Okay. Next is Gordon. Can we unmute Gordon?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. This is only my second time being in a community board meeting. I'm calling because I strongly support these protected bike lanes. I've used the temporary ones and they are safer, although not quite safe compared to what it was before. These streets are so dangerous the way people drive on them. And there's no way to get to the western part of the district below 77th Street on any kind of bike lane of any kind. So if you're trying to get to Madison and 64th, there's no safe way to do so, and it does not feel safe. Like most people in the district, I don't own a car, and we live in one of the most transit-rich neighborhoods in the country, and these bike lanes go by within a block of 3 different subway lanes. So it's a great way to connect people, and you won't have to use your car to get to them. I would love to see a new Manhattan-bound entrance on the Queensboro Bridge. As it is, it's really strange to go down 2nd Avenue to have to go down to 1st and then back onto the bridge. So I fully support the DOT's decision to add a new entrance there. The only thing I would hope about these new bike lanes is that I've ridden on the lane on 52nd Street, which it looks like it's similar to the one that's going in now. And it's so narrow, and like trucks opening their doors into this narrow bike lane, even though it is quote unquote protected, doesn't leave any space for you to go by. So I hope they could be a little wider than 4 feet, considering the buffer size, and that they could be truly protected like a previous commenter mentioned. So again, I strongly support. I hope that the residents of the neighborhood can appreciate that including bike lanes will actually improve safety for all of us, reduce noise, and reduce deaths due to motorists killing cyclists and pedestrians. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments at all from DOT on that? Okay.
Thanks for pointing out the width. It is narrower, just so all the people who don't believe in this bike lane do understand that sometimes we do even have to compromise for cyclists, and everybody has to share the roadway. It is narrow. These are narrow like those other ones, but we're given an amount of space on the roadway, and that's how we use it.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Judy Schneider. Can we unmute Judy?
Evening. Thank you for coming tonight. I have a couple of questions, and if you don't have answers for them, you know how to contact me, DOT. I'd appreciate hearing from you. I've been asking since this started for traffic agents. Has DOT, as an agency, spoken with the police department section that handles the traffic agents to see if we can get more agents on 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue and possibly York, although York is pretty well covered by the construction. 1st and 2nd Avenue at 61st and 62nd Streets to handle the traffic tie-ups on the avenues because of the bike lanes. So that's question one. Question two, we had a streetlight meeting last night and somebody looked it up and said the bike lanes on 1st and 2nd Avenue on the DOT website said that the electric bikes could go 30 miles an hour. I don't understand that since car traffic can only go 25 miles an hour. So if you could look at the 5-mile difference, I would appreciate that. And let me know why they can go faster in the bike lane. And lastly, how many ambulance space did you allow for? Your drawing shows 1 ambulance. Is that all, or can they park 2 ambulances there? How much is allowed? And lastly, the park, when you get to 62nd, 61st, and 5th Avenue, how exactly do they get into the park? Do they go north? Do they go south? How do they get into the park?
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Judy, it's Ed. I'll ask Paula to talk about the technical design. But first of all, we have spoken with NYPD, both about the need for increased enforcement along the corridors and perhaps additional traffic agents. Obviously, there's always a great constraint on the supply of agents, but we'll continue to have those conversations with PD as we move forward. It will be particularly important if we implement those first few weeks of a new traffic pattern. So yes, we will coordinate closely with PD. For the e-bikes on 1st and 2nd Avenue, I think there just may have been confusion in the way the state law is written. It states that you can't use an e-bike on any street with a speed limit greater than 30 miles an hour. E-bikes must follow the posted speed limit, so they do not get an extra 5 miles an hour. So on 1st or 2nd Avenue, e-bikes would need to travel at 25 miles an hour. And Paul, I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about the plans for the dialysis center.
Yeah, so that was an illustration. That's not up to scale or anything like that. So work with the dialysis center and assess their needs, and then work on a final design based on their needs.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next, Matt Bauer from the Madison Avenue Bid. Can we unmute Matt?
Hi. Good evening, everyone. The Madison Avenue Bid respectfully requests that the community board's approval for the bike lane should be contingent on the restaurants on East 61st and East 62nd Streets being able to operate curbside seating as part of the city's open restaurants program. Open restaurants has allowed restaurants to stay open and keep their workers during the COVID crisis. And we really appreciate the community supporting the restaurants during these difficult months. And even now, when the restaurants are allowed to be operating at 35% capacity, so many diners still demand to eat outdoors because they're afraid or uncomfortable to be inside. And that's really not going to change anytime soon. You know, the city's open restaurants program is critical for survival of our restaurants. And the bottom line is that we cannot lose over 100 jobs at Amaranth, Fleming by Le Bouquet, La Galou, and Serafina. We can't afford to have more vacant storefronts in our community, and we can't afford to allow places to have inspire such genuine affection to close unnecessarily. Now, we really do appreciate DOT's flexibility regarding open restaurants last summer when they established a temporary bike lanes. But the pilot program, the temporary bike lanes, really is a proof of concept that the street is wide enough to support the needs of cyclists, motorists, pedestrians, and our restaurants with their open restaurant curbside seating. So we just really ask that the restaurants' needs be brought into this whole picture, and that we follow up with that in the coming days.
Thank you, Matt. DOT want to comment on the restaurant issue?
We would, Chuck. Thank you. And first of all, thank you to Matt. He and I have spoken many times since last summer, not only about how to help businesses and restaurants on these two corridors, but throughout his district. And he's a great partner of the agency, and we appreciate it. DOT is tremendously proud of our effort last year to create the open restaurant program and get it up to massive scale in really a shockingly small amount of time. At the time of launch, we thought the open restaurant program would only last through essentially the end of September or October. And then as the pandemic progressed, we realized that it needed to go longer. The mayor originally extended it until the end of November, and then indicated his wish to see a permanent open restaurant program. I've already committed to Matt, and will repeat the commitment publicly, that while we are here tonight discussing a corridor-wide strategy, we will of course work with the individual restaurants to see what modifications we are able to do. And some of that will quite honestly depend upon timing of this project, when we are actually able to schedule implementation, as well as the timing of the overall open restaurant program. Because we do hope that we're going to transition from a temporary program to a permanent program. And I think the guidelines will, of course, be updated to reflect some of the successes we've seen, but also some of the challenges in Manhattan and beyond. So I'm happy to work with the existing restaurants who have existing setups and talk about what we're able to do and keep that conversation. No one will be surprised. This plan would not be implemented tomorrow. We're still months away from when our marking season would begin. Just for everyone's knowledge, we really do need reliably warmer weather above 50 degrees before we're able to install markings of this kind. So I'm confident that we have the time, and we certainly have the great desire to try to reach a good place and accommodation wherever possible. I can't commit that it's going to be in perpetuity. That's one of the things with the open restaurant program that we'll have to account for. Already we've worked with restaurants where construction, including utility construction or roadway work, needed to happen, and it was unfortunate that some of those restaurants needed to remove their setups, but we take those conversations extremely seriously, and you'll find us willing partners to try to reach solutions wherever possible.
Can I actually ask a question related to this? And that is, if the plan is calling for the 2 lanes to be maintained, or a parking lane to be maintained along 61st and 62nd Streets, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was how it was shown in the presentation. If that's the case, wouldn't restaurants be able to follow the current rules of the open restaurants program and be able to use the space in the parking lane for outdoor seating during the temporary, while the program's still in its temporary form, much like we see on 2nd Avenue?
Absolutely, if there's parking in front of the restaurant.
Yeah, in the temporary form, wherever we're able to maintain that parking regulation, then again, for the temporary open restaurant program, that would be permissible. There may be, maybe points along the corridors where we're considering some design tweaks in terms of a permanent bike lane project that may in the future preclude setting up for restaurants. But that is a really just location specific issue, and we will work with each of those restaurants to figure out what solutions may be possible.
Baseball. Clearly said, though, if there's parking there in front of the restaurant in the plan, you should be able to get a restaurant in there as long as it's a full-time parking lane.
So again, just I want to make an important distinction. That is true for the temporary open restaurant program at the moment. And while the city moves forward and develops a permanent plan, we'll have to see how the guidelines evolve.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Okay, next, Louisa's iPad. Can we connect Louisa?
Yes. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, good. Okay. I've been to a couple of these meetings before, and I'm very grateful to have an opportunity to talk. I wanted to join several of the other people, Nina, Richard, Josh, Anu, Don, who live on 62nd Street, as I do, as I have for 45 years. And as we've all pointed out, 62nd Street, it has always been an incredibly challenged street in terms of vehicular traffic. I can tell you that there is a distinction, though, between 61st and 62nd. 61st Street is actually a wider street by about anywhere between 5 and 6 feet. I have pictures. I can demonstrate to you that there is actually, with the bike lane, there's still a passing lane on 61st Street. This is not true on 62nd Street because many times when we've hailed a taxi in front of our building and he has stood there to take us in, nobody can pass on the left-hand side because the bollards prevent any car from passing on that side. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, whoever thinks that there are 2 traffic lanes. There are not. There is exactly one. And when in the afternoon, the traffic starts to turn left on 62nd Street, going down Park Avenue and turns right going up from Park Avenue, 62nd Street is a mess. It is totally a mess. Yesterday, there was a serious accident on Lexington Avenue, and there were ambulances that could not get through, wailing their sirens. I mean, this is really a safety issue. People can die while they are waiting to get through. So I challenge the notion that 62nd Street is 2 lanes. It is not 2 lanes. It is 1 lane. So I rest my case.
Thank you. Thank you, Louisa. Okay, why don't we go to Don Constantine and unmute Don.
Dan, there you go.
Hello?
Yes.
Am I there?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. We understand the need of the bike lanes and also the very difficult job of DOT to balance the needs of all parties concerned. However, we feel that the community board approval of the permanent bike lanes should be dependent upon the restaurants able to operate curbside dining. What happens, we installed our curbside just a month ago, later than other people due to technical issue, the heating situation. And the DOT is denying us access at this point, while all our competitors in the neighborhood, they have it. They told us the implementation period was over, although we never received any warning that there was an implementation period, so we could have acted maybe in time. We would like to, we try to appeal and to plead with DOT, but we're getting no feedback. We'd like to engage in a dialogue with DOT to find a resolution to this matter, because in this neighborhood we are singled out. We cannot, they don't let us having the roadside dining while all our competitors have it. For us not to having the roadside dining is very detrimental for all our employees who suffered much as it is, and for our business compared to our competitors.
Did you say that you are from Amaranth?
Yeah, Amaranth Restaurant, I'm sorry, on 62nd Street, corner with Madison. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Dan. And I know Ed, you can contact Ed Pinkar, and he's usually very willing to talk.
Chuck, I've already emailed Dan as of last Friday, offering to speak with him. It's a little bit of a different situation for him because unfortunately, the structure that he has placed is entirely within the temporary bicycle lane. It's posing an imminent threat to cyclists and to motorists. And I can't change the design currently because the weather precludes me from painting. So I'm happy to talk with Dan, and we can bring Matt Bauer and the council member's office into the conversation and discuss what options exist, but he has received word that the current structure is unfortunately outside the bounds of the program.
Well, Dan, yeah, you should contact Ed and sit down and see if there's a way to work around this, and hopefully you'll find it. Thank you. Okay, Wendy Schoen is next. Can we unmute Wendy?
Hi. I have 2 points. My first point is a question of whether you have had done any. First of all, I've lived here for 40 years, and the corner of 62nd and 2nd has always been a traffic nightmare. People can't cross the street. Traffic is a horrific problem there, and we have complained about it for 40 years, and nobody has done anything about it, whether putting a traffic police officer there or anything. And I wanted to know whether anybody's done any studies of that before you put in the bike lanes and made it even worse. Worse. People take their lives in their hands trying to cross the street. My second issue is I'm handicapped, and I have a handicap sticker and my doctor said, and the way I got it is my doctor said I can't walk more than 200 feet. You have now eliminated anywhere for me to park within a 2-block radius. I can't park in front of my building, the bike lane's there. I can't park across the street because the markings say that I can't park there. And now you've turned it into a 2-lane rush hour driving zone, so I couldn't park there regularly if I wanted to. You're not taking everybody's interests into mind when you're planning these bike lanes. There's nowhere for me to park. You've eliminated, and I can't park anywhere near my building because you've put the parking that was in front of my building, you've now taken away and put in a bike lane. Great, thanks so much. You're really taking all New Yorkers' worries into heart when you're planning these things. That's all I have to say. I don't ride a bike either.
Okay, thank you. There any?
Chuck, you may have missed it. We received a message that the dialysis center rep needs to leave the meeting. If we can just allow her to speak now, I think we should allow her to. I think that's JMR.
Craig, who is that?
I think it's under JMR, I believe.
Sure, yeah. Why don't we do that? And I think the previous speaker, if there's anything that DOT can talk to them about, we'd appreciate it. Wendy, talk to Wendy Schoen about JMR.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Who do you want to speak now? Hello? Oh, hi, this is Judy Amar. So I work at the dialysis center, and I was on this call before. So a lot of things that I want to speak about, I think were touched upon. Josh mentioned a lot of them. One thing is, with this proposed lane for the ambulance/ambulette and the bike, there is not enough space. The ambulance or the ambulette, they're very large, and there will not be enough space for both of them. I definitely have seen a lot of traffic from the bikes being backed up behind, waiting for the ambulette. There's not enough room to go around them. I think we were told from on behalf of dialysis that we would be involved in this design process, or that we would be able to give input. And no one has been in touch with me to give any input on behalf of our center. And that's about it.
Kim, DOT, I know.
Sure, this is Kimberly from the Manhattan Borough Commissioner's Office. Judy and I spoke today just to touch base about the fact that we have a concept plan for this location that we're still going to be working through the details on, and that we would follow up with her to discuss the details of that design and kind of, as Paula mentioned previously, to talk through their specific needs. What was shown on the screen is a concept based on other designs we've done elsewhere, but it's not the specific design.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll be talking to Judy.
Yeah, as Ed mentioned, and Paula, will be doing a lot of follow-up calls and conversations. This is the beginning of our process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next, Jessime. Is there, can we unmute Jessime?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, so I want to say thank you for this plan, and I'm excited to hear the intention is for it to go forward after the pandemic is over. And you know, coming over the Queensboro Bridge, more often than not, I'm going to Central Park. So I do the hairpin down to First and then make a left back up the hill onto 61st. And the first time I rode up 61st to 2nd Avenue and had protected space, it was just a palpable relief. I mean, in the past, I would be trying to go up a hill with all these cars coming in at me and all of them trying to take every inch to the curb. So it is just like, I can't even say how much safer and how much better it is to get to the park now coming over the Queensboro Bridge. And also just to mention that hairpin turn again, to be able to have that gate reopened for cyclists would be so huge. There's such a pinch point at First Avenue, and the hairpin turn is so crazy. So I really look forward to seeing what the intentions are to do there. I think it will be a vast improvement. So thank you.
Thank you. Dale Hall, can we unmute Dale?
Hello, thanks for taking my comment, and thank you to DOT for all their research. I ride past that area all the time because it's the most reasonable connection between Central Park and the Queensboro Bridge, and that's where people want to go, whether it's people within the district and also people all over the city. It's a really important route for cyclists, just like it is for drivers. And the connection around the Queensboro Bridge is really stressful in its current situation. I feel genuinely unsafe there on a bike pretty much every time. And I know pedestrians feel the same way. The temporary solution has been better, but there's not nearly enough protection or enforcement. And the new solution looks great, especially right by the Queensboro Bridge and with the exit, allowing you to get up to 61st and 62nd. But enforcement will be really critical, and also putting in some physical barriers beyond just the flexi post to prevent vehicles from driving in the bike lane or parking incorrectly. So I hope that the DOT is looking at what kind of infrastructure can be put in the ground, while of course respecting emergency services and the needs of restaurants and such. And I just wanted to really quickly respond to a few of the other comments. Firstly, these lanes are just not about just weighing the needs of the cyclists today. It's also about making cycling safer to allow more people to use bikes. There's so many people I know, even in the Upper East Side, who would love to bike, but they're afraid to bike in Manhattan, and I don't blame them. But if there's more protected bike lanes, and if they're enforced, and if they're kept clean, more people will bike, and that might even reduce car traffic. And also, you know, the bike lanes are about creating space for everyone, and that improves the street experience, whether you're on foot or even driving. It makes it safer and less stressful. And so really everyone can win. So I hope this gets approved.
Thank you. Next is Barbara Goldman Lemoine. Can we unmute Barbara?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I live on 62nd and 2nd. I've been on these calls before. I have a different angle now. I've been what I consider disabled for the past month and will be for another month. 62nd Street is a very narrow street. I've needed to take Ubers or taxis to get to physical therapy. And I'm wondering, how am I supposed to get into an Uber or a taxi? And I'm not just saying for me, I'm saying for people in the child care center picking up or dropping off children, the same as the dialysis. The street is narrow so that if I stop, first of all, I'm not near the curb. And second of all, it's not safe for me to go. I'd really appreciate some feedback on that. As far as there being 3 lanes, it's not enforced. So there really is only one traffic lane for cars. And right now the bike lane is a little narrower. I'm wondering, are you planning on making it wider? And what type of separation is there going to be? Because getting into and out of an apartment building, if there's a permanent barrier, I'm wondering how that's going to happen, because we can't walk to 2nd Avenue because there's another bike lane there. So that's a few questions that I have. The other thing, I've been reading about, what's it called? The pricing that's going to come in. I forget the term. They're going to start charging if you go below 62nd Street in a car. Has that been thought about at all? Because I'm wondering if more people are going to start using 62nd Street, more cars as a cross-town street. And I'd like to know if anybody has any information about that.
Why don't we let DOT, you want to comment?
Sure. I'll talk just very briefly about congestion pricing, which is the state proposal to charge for private vehicle use below 60th Street. So that requires federal review and approval. The new administration in Washington has indicated that they plan to take up that process relatively quickly. The MTA and TBTA, which is the lead agency for this project, will be conducting a traffic study. They are coordinating with DOT very closely, since some of that equipment would be put on the city's right of way. And should this gain some traction down in Washington, D.C., I would expect that folks would be hearing a lot more from the state on that proposal. Our proposal tonight is not dependent upon congestion pricing in any way. We see independent utility, but certainly if we are able to achieve a reduction in vehicular volumes in Manhattan due to congestion pricing, I think that would go a long way to addressing a lot of the traffic concerns that you've raised here and others have raised for similar projects.
Ed, do you see, one of the questions that I thought was being raised by Barbara was, do you see the more traffic on 61st and 62nd if congestion pricing goes in?
Chuck, there's going to be, the state is leading the overall traffic study, and I think they would be better suited to answer that question. I think one of the things that will make this project successful, whatever happens with congestion pricing, is that you're designating space for balanced uses, and it makes it more difficult for vehicles to overtake it. So I think there will be many more conversations in the months to come about what a congestion pricing scheme looks like, but we don't see it negatively impacting this project whatsoever.
Okay, thanks. Any further comments from DOT? Okay, why don't we go to Andy Rosenthal and unmute Andy? Is Andy there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, just unmuting. Can you hear me, Chuck?
Yes.
Okay. I grew up near the 59th Street Bridge and frequently currently commute to New York Hospital and HSS in your district. There has been traffic, as you've heard a couple of people say, on 61st, 62nd Street for at least 40 or 50 years. The traffic has been there. We ought to be talking about how to get rid of the traffic, not how to get rid of the bikes. Which one of these is a problem? CB8 currently has an epidemic problem, a preventable epidemic. In the last 10 years, and this is data from Crash Mapper, there have been 6,191 people seriously injured in crashes caused by automobiles. That's 2 people per day with life-altering injuries in CB8. What is this committee doing to make the area safer for all of its citizens. DOT has shown us that bike lanes reduce pedestrian injuries by 21%. These lanes, and hopefully the ones to come, will prevent more serious injuries. We should be working on prevention. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Victoria Orden. Can we unmute Victoria?
Just confirm unmuting on your screen. Yeah, you have to push a button. There you go.
Hi. Just a few things. Early on in the conversation, somebody talked about solving climate change by having people bike. I hardly think that 1 or 2 bike lanes on one side of the park will solve the climate problem. 2, that there would be consistent enforcement. In the era of Black Lives Matter and trying to be more cognizant of what police do and don't do we really want to have an armed force on the Upper East Side so that we can enforce these? 3, people, the delivery bikes bike on the sidewalk. They've always biked on the sidewalk. They don't even use the lanes because I live on 62nd between Park and Lex. What was the other thing? Oh, and economically, I mean, talking about the cost benefit here and weighing separate needs, people biking from Queens are not going to spend money at Upper East Side restaurants. I agree with the gentleman early on who said people are discouraged from coming into the city and it's a ghost town. I'm in Santa Barbara right now and my subletter told me it's just dead on Lex for 20 blocks. So I'm very disturbed by the lack of concern for business and for residents and for the handicapped. And I think it's really disingenuous for the DOT to pretend that they're really all about safety. I have video of the congestion. That graph is absolutely not consistent with the video that I have. It is a nightmare. It's loud, it uses gas, it's a disaster. And I'm just disturbed by the total disingenuousness of the DOT. Thank you.
I don't know if DOT wants to make any comment, but.
Well, Chuck, if Victoria would like to share her videos with me, we're happy to review them. We have engaged with dozens of residents. I have not been able to address all of their concerns, and I know that there is some disagreement, and that's okay. Josh Rubinger, who's a really wonderful guy, he and I have talked about modifications that we were able to make and modifications that we weren't able to make. We're trying to achieve a balanced network. And when you do that, you're going to take away some previous uses for some new uses that are similarly important. And we're following really the lead of our elected officials who have identified sustainable transportation options as necessary for New York's future. And we mentioned it a little bit earlier today. The master plan bill will take effect next year. You're going to see many, many more of these types of projects, not only protected bicycle lanes, but new bus lane projects, projects that create pedestrianized space coming to CB8 and other community boards throughout the city. And there could be disagreement about that, absolutely. But our charge is to really strike the right balance. And Victoria, I don't think you and I have spoken about this, but you're always welcome to reach out and we can talk more.
Thank you, Ed. Ellen, can we unmute Ellen?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Go right
hi.
ahead.
I live on the west side, and I just want to broaden this a little bit. Let me first say that I'm very much in favor of the 61, 62. I think it's been there are very compelling reasons for it. It's been very thoroughly thought about. It's great that everybody is getting their say, but this goes on forever. I'd like to broaden this a little bit. I don't think you can talk about crosstown between 59th Street and 110th Street without dealing with the issue of Central Park. It's one thing when you talk about East Side avenues. It's a different thing. The minute you start talking about crosstown, you have to think about Central Park and how it blocks any crosstown bike traffic between those two streets. And I and many others have been working very hard to make some kind of safe passage to get from the east to the west, west to east. And I think maybe it's time for Community Board 8 and Community Board 7 to get together and put their heads together. I can't get I live on West 79th Street. I can't get to the east side safely on my bicycle. I'm expected to dismount and walk across the park, which is ridiculous. And we've been fighting for this forever. We all acknowledge that bikes have proliferated enormously, and yet we have not done anything about or next to nothing about the infrastructure. So I would like to think about accommodating safe, dedicated crosstown passage for bikes at the same intervals as automobiles. For example, 72nd, 79th, 86th, 96th, automobiles can go east, west, west, east. So again, it's the east side and the west side really need to be together when it comes to anything that's crosstown.
Thank you. I would mention that we have looked into the infrastructure in Central Park, and we're trying to see if that could be improved, as you were saying, so bicyclists are able to go through the park better. So that's something that we have looked at and we're going to continue to look at. Okay, Robert Britannia next. Robert, can we unmute Robert? Is he there?
Robert, just confirm unmuting on your screen. There you go.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, could I yield my time to my wife, who's Julianne Bertagna?
Well, if you want to say something, yes, but everybody gets 2 minutes, so I don't think I know Julianne and she sent us a lot of stuff, but I think if you want to say something, that's fine. But if Julianne, wants to say something, we're not really yielding time that way. Because we still have a lot of speakers to go. So you don't want to say anything then? Okay.
He muted himself back, so.
Okay, fine. Let's go on. Let's go on to the next. Is what I see Serafina Management next?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I represent Serafina Restaurant Group and property on 61st between Madison and Park Avenue. We've proudly served the community for 20 years. And
excuse me, could you state your name just for the record?
I'm sorry about that. My name is Ian Medwin. I apologize about that. I forget I'm using a corporate account sometimes. We just want to basically state that the Open Restaurant Act was a lifeline to our industry. In fact, it's the only thing that really saved us. We dedicated ourselves about a year ago to keep feeding the community and serving the public that is surrounded by our restaurants. And 61st is a home to about, at the beginning of this, 120 people. We ended up with about 35 employees. And then we dedicated the remaining amount of our money to the outside dining areas. When we built this open restaurant area, it gave us another 50 seats. And these 50 seats are what's keeping our employees with jobs. We've all bent and skewed and played to every law and regulation that's come over the last year. And we've tried really hard to succeed and keep our employees healthy and safe and the community around us healthy and safe. And what we'd ask for this meeting is that you consider that when this goes in, there are some accommodations for these lifeboats that the city and the state have provided for us. It's not necessary, it's essential and almost unbelievable if it was taken away. We would have to say to ourselves that financially we cannot survive, and either can the people and their families that work at these restaurants every day. All we ever really wanted to do was take care of people and make sure they're happy and serve good food in a good environment. But the only way we can do that right now is having these outside cafes. And since we're not sure of when this pandemic will end, having 35% capacity is good, but it only allows us to have 30 people inside the restaurant. Well, the rent is still at full capacity every single month and the fixed costs never go away. So we just ask that you consider restaurants and give some accommodations while we do.
Thank you, Ian. And I think we've heard that before, and I think we're sensitive to that. Isabel Coleman, can we unmute Isabel?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Great. I am a resident of 62nd Street between 3rd and 2nd Avenue. I've lived here for about 17 years. And I just wanted to chime in and share my thoughts. Like Louisa and Barbara, I wanted to share that the block really is just a 1-lane traffic lane right now. There is not space for 2 lanes. So I wanted to confirm that. I've worked from home the entire time. And like one of the other speakers mentioned, there's not the level of traffic that we normally have. And I care about safety so much. I care about safety for the bikers. I care about safety for the pedestrians, to the extent that when I first moved here, my child, who's now almost an adult at 18, he was a toddler. And I would ask that my babysitters not go on 2nd Avenue because I was so concerned about how dangerous it was to cross the streets on 2nd Avenue. That's how concerned I was in the lower 60s and the upper 50s with a babysitter and a stroller. And I wouldn't even go there, to be honest with you. So my issue and my concern at this level, because I do believe that these bike lanes are important, protecting bikers is very important, protecting pedestrians is very important, that we continue it for it to be a temporary program until we have more data when the environment is normalized. This is not a normal environment in terms of traffic levels. I know that because I've been working from home for 17 years and I see it every single day. I sit at the window when I take phone calls, and this is not normal times. And I think this is not an appropriate time. And I think we should just delay the decision of this and keep it as is until you have more information. Thank you.
Thank you. DOT, want to comment on that?
Yeah, can I speak a little bit about the safety improvements? So basically, the protected bike lanes is really a narrowing of the roadway, organizing everybody in their own place, but most important for pedestrian safety, the improvements that we make at the intersections, right? Like so a dedicated turn lane, for example, is when we have signal timing where pedestrians don't mix with cars, or cyclists, or opening up the intersection, so making cars shift a little bit more so their pedestrians are more visible to them. There are a number of things that we deploy when we install protected bike lanes that do improve the visibility at the corners and improve safety, especially at the intersections where most of the crashes occur. And can we just clarify that we, while there are some locations where we're looking at 2 lanes, we understand that there are also segments that are 1 lane. So it varies from block to block. And we know that there are some streets, some blocks that are wider than others as well.
Thank you.
And Chuck, just a comment on the permanency of a bike lane, should we move forward. By design, DOT implements this type of project with paint and flexible delineators and signage. We often make modifications to our projects post-implementation. We never just walk away from a project if there are problems. We're out there looking at signal timing. We're thinking through additional parking regulation changes, and we'll certainly work with the community board, the elected officials, and residents should we move forward on additional changes that may be necessary following the initial implementation. So, this is not a project that involves multiple tons of concrete that then can't be changed after the fact. And you certainly have our commitment to meet you out on the street and review any issues together.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Okay, Rob Burns is next. Can we unmute Rob?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. First of all, it's a great conversation tonight, and it's always good to see all the members of one of my 3 favorite community boards in the city. I really just want to echo what Matt Bauer said about being sensitive to the needs of, well, he mentioned restaurants specifically. I want to say all small businesses. We are in unprecedented times. I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know. Bike lanes can be done at any time. COVID is something that I hope has a limited shelf life. So while we are under this pandemic, I really do encourage DOT and the community board to consider the fact that that our restaurants and retailers really need some priority treatment. I also want to reemphasize what Barbara Goldman Lemoine said in her comments. Consider congestion pricing. In, I don't know how long, a year, 2 years, the 61st, 62nd, 63rd, 57th, 8th, and 9th too, could be some of the most congested cross streets in the city of New York if congestion pricing comes into play. Because we already know that cars are going to be circling and circling and circling, looking for non-existent parking spots. That's just a reality. I'm not trying to say that cars have supremacy over vehicles, but I am saying that we are going to basically choke this 6-7 block area of Manhattan for residents and business. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. By the way, we're only having people speak once, so we can't call because we don't have enough time to call on people twice. So we're going to go to Leah Hanlon next, please. Can we unmute Leah? Are you there, Leah?
Yes, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting.
It's okay.
My comment is sort of general because my more specific issues have been covered by other people. But I think there would be a lot fewer objections to bike lanes if more cyclists followed the basic rules of the road. But to say that there's enforcement is really just disinformation. There is no enforcement. Cyclists run the reds, they salmon, they go on the sidewalk, riding fast on an e-bike on the sidewalk. I could go through a whole list of bicyclists behaving badly, but we all know how they ride. I've even had elderly neighbors move specifically because of the bikes. Can you please at least speak more accurately about enforcement? Because there just is none.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Leah. I don't know if DOT wants to comment on that.
I mean, Chuck, obviously, we can loop NYPD into the conversation. If you look at their statistics before 2020, obviously, I can't speak to that in COVID. There was a steady increase in NYPD enforcement against cycling. I would want the two precincts to comment on their specific efforts to try to devote resources to it. They're certainly not able to catch every cyclist who rides the wrong way or on the sidewalk. At DOT, we try, we don't have enforcement power over cyclists. We try to conduct routine education efforts, particularly to commercial cyclists, to make sure that they're aware of the rules of the road, and then that they're equipped with the tools that they need, including helmets and vests and lights and bells. We'll continue those efforts while we also coordinate with NYPD, but I'm sure the precincts would be happy to come and share an update on their efforts for cycling.
Thank you, Ed. Mitchell Hershey next. Can we unmute Mitchell?
Okay, hi, my name is Mitchell Hershey. I live on 62nd Street and 3rd Avenue. And I want to re-echo what other participants have said about 62nd Street being a one-lane street. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's even less than 1 lane, because if there are dumpsters, if there's renovations going on and there are dumpsters, it has to be on the other side of the street. And if there are any trucks parking, it has to be on the south side of 62nd Street. And if any car wants to make a turn, when I'm driving down 62nd Street from 3rd Avenue to 2nd Avenue, and I want to make a right-hand turn, and it's blocked up to go towards the FDR, you have to just keep waiting there. There's no way to pass by because of the bike lane. And prior to these temporary bike lanes, at least the cars that were going straight could continue going straight. And if you wanted to make a right-hand turn onto 2nd Avenue, you could do that. Now you can no longer do that. You have to wait your turn till you reach the street. It backs up to 3rd Avenue. It backs up to Lexington Avenue. And it's really a horrendous situation. Additionally, from my observations, there are very few bikers on those bike lanes. I don't know what type of analysis has been done, but the number of bikes on that bike lane between 62nd and 3rd and 2nd Avenue is very minimal. So I don't know what the purpose of having the bike lane there, because most of the bikers bike on the street anyway. Because many times, even with the bike lanes, there are cars parked next to the building to let in and out passengers from those townhouses and from the apartment house.
Thank you.
Just to add in really quickly, just because I know there's a lot of concerns about safety, the person who just talked said something about waiting your turn as a vehicle. And that's actually one of the reasons why these are a little bit safer. It might cause you a little bit of anguish to see that bike lane. Maybe it's not used right then, but that's actually a lot safer for pedestrians. And that's why we have a very consistent rise. 20% number has been thrown out there, but that N is actually quite high considering the amount of protected bike lanes that are out there. There's no other city in the world that has this many bike lanes to compare this to. And that's actually really one of the big reasons is we don't have that free space right at the crosswalk, right while people are crossing, right where people are putting their baby strollers out into the street, where that really does make it a lot safer for people. Just to point out that. And I also wanted to say one more thing. Kim mentioned this, the 1 lane issue versus 2 lanes. What I meant to say is we're accommodating the lanes that were there before with rush hour lanes, et cetera. Please look at the presentation online. You'll see that we've accounted for the different size streets there. And that's a fact.
Thank you. Okay, Harvey Doliner. Can we unmute Harvey?
Yeah, I'll go quickly. I understand that you've spent a great deal of time working on this proposal and are invested in its implementation. But I believe 2 of the points that you made in this over the last couple of hours were disingenuous. First, I'd like to confirm that I understand your statement that congestion pricing below 60th Street will not impact traffic on 61 and 62, and that this plan addresses that implementation impact. And then the second thing is, on more than one occasion, you showed a chart that shows an improvement in traffic flow, implying that it was from the temporary bike lane plan, but you didn't point out that it also coincidentally was the exact same time as the COVID pandemic, February to February, March to February. So I don't know that looking at traffic flow, March to February would have been any different absent any changes in traffic, other than the fact there are a heck of a lot less people in traffic in New York City right now.
You want to address that? I don't think that's quite what Ed said, but
yeah, I was going to Chuck, that's not what I said about congestion pricing. Congestion pricing is an effort being led by the state. The state is going to undertake a traffic study for the overall service area and the neighborhoods to the north. So of particular concern will be the Upper East and Upper West sides. Should that move forward, the state will conduct public outreach and share a lot of that information. My comment was we think that this proposal would work with any potential congestion pricing plan. And that is very accurate, and I think our honest assessment at the agency. Of course, should there be changes that need to be made because of a potential congestion pricing plan, this project, which is being achieved through paint and signage and flexible delineators, can be accommodated and modified as necessary. I think that was my statement about congestion pricing. Paula or Ted, can you talk a little bit more about the traffic data?
As far as the chart, I believe I made that comment exactly, that I don't want to put too much weight in that. Paula can show the chart again and show you the exact dates, but traffic patterns are different now. And this isn't a standard presentation where we can say that it's, gotten terribly better. And I certainly not want to imply that the bike lane is the reason why that happened. I'm just merely showing the facts of what did happen. There's a lot there. I do not want to play God with traffic. Believe me, I did not get into this for that. But I do want you to understand that, like, with the limited tools that we have and this environment that's weird for all of us, crap, I'm trying to put a little kid to bed right now while I'm talking on a community board meeting. This is weird. So I just want you to understand that is a little bit odd, and maybe Paula, you can go into some of the details and show it.
Paula, did you want to comment?
You're muted.
Really simply, I think that the point was not to show that the bike lane has improved traffic, but just to just kind of demonstrate that some of the claims about increased traffic, that we have some data that doesn't quite line up with that. So and it shows that we did see those increases in congestion immediately following implementation, but then once we made some changes, we did see a return to more normal levels.
Yeah, and I think everybody mentioned this before, but this is not something that we implement and walk away from. We continue to monitor. There's really great information if you guys go on the DOT website on presentations for 52, 55, 26, 29. There's great information what the traffic data shows after bike lanes were implemented in similar corridors. So I encourage everybody to look at that. Obviously, it's different times. So we're here for the long haul. We're going to monitor this and come back and make adjustments if those are required.
Thank you. I'm announcing here that the last speaker we're going to have on this is Brian Howells. Those are the last. We're not taking anyone after that. There's no one signed up after that, but I'm just putting everybody on notice. We have about 7 more speakers because we have to go to the board, and we'll have a discussion on the board, and we have another thing we have to discuss about, and I think we've put off one of our items because we're taking so much time on this. Next is Judy Birdie from Roosevelt Island. We're always happy to welcome the historian of Roosevelt Island, and welcome, Judy. And why don't we unmute Judy?
Could you just confirm on your screen?
Okay. Good evening. Greetings from Roosevelt Island, where we have no traffic problems, but we have lots of bicycles. I lived on 65th Street for a few years now. I've been on the island. My family lived on 3rd Avenue and 65th, and on 3rd Avenue and 63rd. And it's terrible. I mean, the conditions have been horrendous always in the 43 years I've known the Upper East Side. In fact, changing the traffic pattern and adding bicycles on top of UPS trucks, FedEx trucks, postal trucks, Amazon Prime trucks, restaurant delivery vehicles, it is impossible to get crosstown. I mean, and just putting bike lanes in for the very few percentage of bikers who would use them is something that I consider very wasteful. And unfortunately, a large percentage of the bikers I see, especially ones trying to get by the Queensboro Bridge, are crossing into traffic lanes, are crossing where people are supposed to be, not bikes. They're not obeying traffic laws and having flexible delineators of great targets just to be knocked over in a few days. It's really sad. I wish we could be a bike-free city. I wish it could be utopian like that. But I really think that just adding more bike lanes onto congested streets is not going to do any good, and it's going to encumber the people who are just trying to live a life and get their packages delivered, get service. If you're disabled, get a cab, get into a car. It's terrible when you have to cross through a city bike bus stop, a city bike rack to get into a cab or to get into a car. I mean, we've just made living here more and more uncomfortable. And I think that DOT should step back and let's reconsider this. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
Vittorio Asif. Next, can we unmute Vittorio?
I apologize.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm online?
Yes, you're on.
Fantastico. My name is Vittorio Asaf. I'm the owner of Serafina on 61st Street. First of all, I'd like to thank you, the community, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Matthew Bauer, for supporting and try to help my industry. I would like to say that I'm also a resident of the Upper East Side. I live on 66th Street for the past 20 years. 61st Street is a very particular street with an incredibly heavy traffic coming from the bridge. In addition, the congestion tax that is going to start very soon will add a tremendous amount of traffic, cars that will avoid the 60th limit where the tax will start, and therefore will turn on 61st Street, adding to the congestion. I don't think we should have a bicycle lane on 61st Street. I think we should have a bicycle lane on 64th, which is a very, very calm side street, or maybe on 67, that is absolutely empty, or on 68, on 69. The best will be actually 72nd Street, much wider on both sides. Anyway, I really need the help of the community board with our small outdoor cafe that we have set up in front of our restaurant, Serafina. We have 8 tables of 2. Actually 6 tables of 2 we have under the gazebo outside, and they are absolutely necessary to our survival. So is the restaurant next door to us, La Goulou, that has another 6 tables on the curb, and they're absolutely necessary to their survival as well. I really hope that you will reconsider this decision, because 61st Street is absolutely the wrong street where to pass with the bicycle lane. Thank you so much for your help, and please, I really need your help.
We heard from La Goulou also. Thank you. Julianne Britannia, next. Can we unmute Julianne?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to be taking my husband's 2 minutes as well. And I want to thank you for putting this all together. I know it's a long evening, but you've heard from me before at 3 other meetings. And I am a biker. I am very interested in more bikes and less cars and cleaner streets and improved air quality. And I look forward to personally experiencing a biking network in New York. But I still question DOT's choice of 61st and 62nd, which has historically been known as an overly trafficked cross corridor that accesses both the FDR and Queensboro Bridge. And I also find it a little disingenuous that DOT has not provided information that you have requested in the past. Chuck, you mentioned, could they tell you about potential other streets they reviewed? I know that Alita Camp asked them to say what factors were important in choosing these streets. Judy Schneider and others asked to take suggestions back about 65th, 66th, 67th. We've heard that on the call today as well. These alternate streets are much wider and actually have a clear crossing to Central Park without as many businesses. I provided a long list of all the businesses, many of them were represented here today, whether restaurants, hospitals, dialysis centers, etc. As the president of Treadwell Farm Historic District, the overwhelming majority of our residents and other area residents are opposed to these bike lanes, not because they're anti-bike. Many of us are actually bike enthusiasts. And what we really fear is the impact of DOT's removal, in our case on 61 and 62 between 2nd and 3rd, of a moving lane of traffic on a historically busy street. This is a very ill-conceived plan, and we are seeing the impact of it. We urge CB8 to not only make these bike lanes permanent until we have a true reflection of a normal traffic and clearer picture of the impact. And keep in mind that the congesting pricing we're all hearing about now, that is going to have a huge impact. What we really need is enforcement, enforcement, enforcement. DOT needs accountability. They should critically analyze the traffic data and bike usage data. Without the many calls and emails to DOT 311, community, our council member, Community Board 8, we still don't see regular traffic enforcement, and we don't see bike maintenance. When the traffic is at a standstill and pedestrians can't cross block streets, we do our best as citizens to call the 19th precinct to get help and hopefully prevent an accident. But there needs to be a daily enforcement plan in place to make these bike lanes safe and our streets safe. Enforcement, enforcement, enforcement. NYPD needs to put traffic officers stationed on the corners. Bikes need to follow traffic rules and obey lights and crossings. Non-truck routes, I know Paula mentioned this. Non-truck route, this is a non-truck route, but it's not enforced, so it still is full of trucks. We have illegal placards, we have illegally parked cars, the bikes at night don't have lights. Delivery people should probably wear a reflective vest. Revel, the moped company, they're in these bike lanes. They should be prohibited and taken out of the bike lanes. I urge CB8 to require DOT to perform a complete traffic study and a bike use study when there's not a pandemic. I would request that you motion not to make these bike lanes permanent until there's an accurate data that we can have a clear picture of what we'll see when it's truly normal. It seems unfair now to make a decision when there is not a true representation of normal. We are all committed to sustainable solutions, and everyone wants safer streets, cleaner air, and more space, but we must not overlook the quality of life issues that many residents talked about today and the historic traffic on these cross streets, which are accesses to both the bridge and the FDR Drive. And I wanted to just say two things, both to Ted. This was a street that had 2 moving lanes of traffic. You didn't get rid of parking, you got rid of a moving lane. So we do see impact on between 2nd and 3rd at a real substantial level, even in a pandemic. So I think more data needs to be there, and we really appreciate all the effort you're making to make this an improved situation.
Thank you, Julianne. Okay. DOT, do you want to respond to the issue of other streets and looking at other streets there? Because that is something that we had talked about before. And I know Judy Schneider and others said maybe there are other streets you could look at, 65th or others. Do you want to
Sure.
respond to that?
Really quickly, I'll have Paula chime in too, but 64 does have a lot of traffic. We need a one-way pair on it. It's not exactly, as we know, those of us in this community board, we went through a lot of this for even regular lanes that removed absolutely nothing. And everybody could find something wrong with a street that you have. The reality is here, 62 and 61 are the closest to the bridge, easiest way to get around the park, get into the park, and get to the waterfront. On 60th, we've now provided direct access by avoiding the major traffic on between First and York. Now, 64 is one way. So where does the second pair go? You can't put on 63rd. That's the worst traffic in the area. All right. 65 doesn't go to the waterfront. So all of these things make it very difficult, and getting into Central Park is a whole nother issue. 72nd Street is, perhaps that would work, but that's actually kind of a different service area. That's a half mile away from what we're talking about. So if somebody's going to Midtown, somebody's working at one of the publishing houses, on 6th Avenue, that's not going to help them. So these are the things that we have to think about as we walk, as we drive. People want to have safe alternatives so they do stay off the sidewalk and are not in dangerous situations. That's part of the reason why we're doing this. Believe me, if it was easier, we would take that route. I would love to go on a different street, but those other streets actually don't work for the reasons that we've said.
Yeah, and I think to add to that a little bit, every street has issues, right? And we're trying to find the best of them all. Here we're taking advantage of the connections. I can go down the list. 63rd, also exit to the bridge. There's a PS 267, 64, and 63rd has a lot of traffic. Then you're talking about 64th, where there's a lot of medical facilities. And I can go on. 65th is a truck route. 66 is a truck and bus route. And then we're getting really far from the bridge. So every street will have their own issues. So it's not like a clean cut, but the connections are really important that we're trying to make.
Thank you, Paula. Scott Avram, can we unmute Scott? Go ahead, Scott.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Go ahead.
I had a lot to say, but Julianne, I think, said everything I was going to say and perhaps said it better than I would have. So just for the record, I'd like to second everything she said. I'm especially concerned, I guess, with the data taken during COVID. I know a lot of other city agencies don't allow data to be taken now and used. So I guess it's a little even surprising to see that slide even on there to begin with. And I agree with everyone that previously asked to have this deferred until a later date when this could be further analyzed. I agree, I guess, with all of your comments that there's probably an issue on every single street that you analyze, but 62nd Street is perhaps only one of two streets that feeds down to the FDR. And being a resident on the street, there's traffic backed up all the way past 3rd Avenue on a regular daily basis. It shouldn't take 15 minutes to go 2 avenues. And while I sit in traffic every day, I see less than a handful of bikes pass by. Yesterday, I sat there for 14 minutes. There wasn't a single biker. So it's not a statistic, it's an observation, but it's basically what I see every day. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Alexandra Manfredi. Can we unmute Alexandra?
Good evening. Thank you for the time. This is my first meeting, but that's not out of lack of concern regarding this issue. I've been an owner on 62nd for over 8 years. I've had these concerns. I've raised these concerns about the bike lane and the general traffic issues and danger in these streets to my councilman as well as to the board of my building on numerous occasions. I don't need to reiterate the concerns regarding the danger of these intersections, particularly 62nd and 61st Street. We've discussed the FDR exit, traffic, delivery vehicles, the dialysis center, and whatnot. These issues are apparent. They've been stated multiple times, and I think they are a significant concern that the DOT should take into consideration. I'm a healthy 32-year-old, myself alone, walking to work, walking to the gym before COVID. I've been nearly hit at least 10 to, if not more times, by bikers in crosswalks, not observing the rules of the road. Again, I'm a healthy 32-year-old. My disabled, my elderly neighbors do not have that luxury that I do to respond quickly. The most troubling aspect of this is that the DOT has not identified any harmonization efforts or enforcement efforts that they have taken with respect to the NYPD or the Department of Sanitation. In the transcript of this evening, in response to Leah Hanlon, Ed Pinkar said at about 8:22, we can loop the NYPD into this conversation. That should have been done already. How is enforcement not a part of this? You know, that is critical. There's no point having bike lanes if you're not enforcing the rules of the road. Similarly, you know, with regard to the Department of Sanitation, there's been multiple snowstorms. The DOS is not removing snow from the bike lanes. What's the point of having the bike lanes if there's garbage and snow and there's bikers violating the rules of the road? In sum, I'm completely against this, and I think this proposal should be rejected. Thank you.
Hey, Chuck, it's Ed. I would like to respond to really important points that Alexandra raised. So first, the issue of maintenance and snow removal and cleaning the street is actually a very important one. And while the temporary lane was in place, it was unable to accommodate standard size DSNY trucks. One of the benefits of a permanent proposal will be that sanitation will indeed be able to get in and clear those areas of debris and snow, which is one of the reasons why we're proposing it. Second, if you actually go back to my response to Judy Schneider, we did coordinate with NYPD traffic at the launch of this program. We requested additional enforcement. We asked them to consider placing additional traffic agents. I've personally spoken with one of the leadership of Manhattan traffic enforcement about the proposal. And as we move forward, potentially with a permanent solution, we will, of course, ask them for assistance moving forward. So there is regular contact between DOT and NYPD on this project in particular, as well as general traffic issues throughout Manhattan.
Yeah, and really quickly to chime in, on top of that, we on the bike team meet with NYPD very regularly. And as Ed mentioned, also there have been lots of tickets. They've been steadily rising. Most bicyclists who do bike a lot get tickets. We are working with them constantly on directing that in the right direction. Making this permanent will only make that easier.
Thank you. All right, our last speaker is Brian Howell, and then we're going to turn to the board. So can we unmute Brian?
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you to the CB8 Transportation Committee for letting the public speak before board deliberation. As a fellow CB member, I think my own board and its committees could learn something from this meeting. 5 years ago, I attended a meeting of this committee when it received a proposal from DOT about 3 crosstown unprotected bike lane pairs. I remember hearing in that meeting people saying, we can't have a bike lane on 85th Street because there's a school there. And we can't have a bike lane on 68th Street because there's a hospital. And we can't have a bike lane on 71st Street because there's an embassy. And we can't have a bike lane on 84th Street because there's double parking. And on and on. There were predictions of doom about what would happen if 2 lines of white paint 5 feet wide were painted on several Upper East Side streets. Several years later, as the world ended, have schools, embassies, hospitals suffered ruin from the bike lanes? At that meeting in February 2016, Hindi Schachter, who spoke tonight, stood up after all these comments and said, double parking, speeding, honking? I think I found your problem, cars. I've heard people speak tonight about the minority of people who bike, but we've allowed people to drive and park on nearly every street in the city, despite the fact that most households in our city don't own cars. Fewer than 11% of residents of Assembly District 73 commute by car, catering to a minority indeed. I grew up on 69th Street and 2nd Avenue. I no longer live on the Upper East Side, but I visit my grandmother who still lives there in a courtyard outside her building. She doesn't live outside her building, but that's where I visit her. And she attended that meeting with me 5 years ago. We New Yorkers all feel like our streets are special, but we live in a city of 8.5 million people, and each type of street has hundreds of analogs somewhere else in the city. I have lived in 4 boroughs, and there's no neighborhood that is uniquely incapable of having protected bike lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, why don't we go to the board, and I'll see Rita Popper first. Raised her hand. Can we Rita? Go ahead, Rita. Unmute yourself there. I think you're on. Go ahead. Now you're.
This is for Ed. I'm not going to take up any time of the board, but I'm talking about the restoration of a bike lane that is on East 91st Street, so that will help how the traffic flows on East 91st Street. I wondered if it would be possible for us to talk tomorrow. That is number one. Number two is, do you have any way, or are you planning to address motorized scooters that go extremely fast? Are they for bike lanes or are they for regular traffic? They don't obey traffic lights, so it's very dangerous when you're crossing. So I wondered if the DOT had any plans to address motorized things other than bikes.
Rita, happy to talk more tomorrow. I'll shoot you an email and we can try to find time to connect.
Talking to you, Ed.
always. We could talk more offline about the e-scooter issues. Obviously, state legislation was just changed that largely allow e-scooters if they're riding on the street with a bike lane, they should be in the bike lane. They must follow all posted regulations. Otherwise, DOT is looking at how to increase public awareness and education for those rules, and we'll work with NYPD on actual enforcement. But we could talk more specific tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, Valerie Mason is next. Can we unmute Valerie?
Thanks, Chuck. I want to say thank you for everyone for coming tonight. A couple of procedural points and then a question. I have to tell you that I'm really kind of upset with the DOT. We've been talking about these bike lanes on 61st and 62nd for quite a while. We've been talking about the issues that the dialysis center has been having. And I don't understand why we couldn't have been given this presentation prior to the meeting tonight so we could all be looking at it. And it's great that all these people are here from the DOT tonight, but without really to have, some of that information before the meeting, I think it makes the meeting less effective. Second, on this dialysis point, we have been asking you at previous meetings about the discussions that were being had between the dialysis center and the DOT. It is really discouraging to hear the dialysis center say tonight that they have not had any communications. And I just want to say, I don't know how we can move from temporary to permanent. This has been going on for 7 months with no discussion. Why should we approve a motion to make this a permanent bike lane, even though, Ed is saying that really it's just some green paint on the street, and that just doesn't make any sense to me, because we've been talking about this, we've been listening to the community. I think every time we talk about a bike lane being permanent or protected or not, we go to the bigger question then of bike lanes in general. And I think what happens is every time we look at another set of lanes, there are more and more impacts. Like, I have to tell you, I think the protected lanes on 1st and 2nd Avenue are great for the bikers. But what has happened with this e-bike situation now is that we have e-bikes that are going upwards of 30 miles an hour in those protected bike lanes. And the DOT has sat here tonight and telling us how the bike lanes are really for the protection of the pedestrian. I can tell you that, seeing one of those e-bikes and they're being used on a regular basis in these protected bike lanes is extremely dangerous for both regular cyclists and pedestrians. And I think the other word that has come up here tonight a lot is enforcement. And I think before we talk about any more bike lanes, whether they be protected or unprotected, we need to figure out whose responsibility is it to enforce this. We were on a Build a Block meeting with the NYPD this week. They talked about how many tickets they're giving. But to look at it again, is it really the job of the New York Police Department to be enforcing the rules that are being put in force by the Department of Transportation? Why doesn't the DOT have its own enforcement division? We talk about best use of police. Is it really the best use of police to be enforcing the bike lanes? I really think as part of a plan, the DOT should be talking about its own enforcement agency for its own rules so that the New York Police Department can focus on real crime. The last thing I want to say as the chair of the Small Business Committee, I can't agree more with Matt and Rob about prioritizing our small business and restaurants during COVID. I have heard so many, we're talking about 61 and 62, but so many restaurant owners who are along the protected bike lanes of 1st and 2nd Avenue have suffered so greatly because they have not been able to use these protected bike lanes for their outdoor space. And I think, in terms of priorities, everyone should, suffer a little bit. And these poor restaurant owners have suffered greatly. And I don't think that any priority or any consideration has been given to these guys. So with respect to 61 and 62, I say we should keep these temporary as long as possible to facilitate small business and restaurant business coming back to life. I can't be in favor of putting these in permanently. And the last question I do want to ask is, the DOT people tonight mentioned that 24% of New Yorkers use their bikes regularly. I want to know what you mean by regularly. What does that mean?
You want to answer that, Ed, or anyone else from DOT? Those questions.
Valerie raised a couple of points. So Valerie, first of all, I think DOT has been at the vanguard of helping restaurants and bars through this pandemic. Our open restaurant program has nearly 11,000 restaurants and bars participating throughout the 5 boroughs. We would of course love for there to have been even more participation. However, we need to strike the right balance in our transportation network. We essentially said to bars and restaurants that if you had parking or loading in front of your frontage, you would be able to set up. But there are a slew of very valid and necessary transportation uses that could preclude setting up, including bus stops and bus lanes and pedestrianized spaces and bike lanes and bike share stations and fire hydrants. So yes, my parents were bar owners growing up. I'm tremendously sympathetic to the industry, and I think we did as good of a job as we possibly could have done in ensuring as much participation as the overall system could hold. In terms of enforcement, again, I'm happy to have a larger conversation offline. DOT used to have parking enforcement underneath, and Rudy Giuliani took it away and gave it to NYPD 20 odd years ago. I know there are some conversations ongoing now about whether that should change, but for the moment, NYPD is responsible for enforcing traffic.
I know, and can I just,
Paula or Ted, can you explain a little bit about the 24%?
Paula, are you there? Hopefully Paula can do it.
Oh, hi, sorry, I was muted. So yes, 24% bike regularly, and regularly was a number that comes out of our Midtown Motion data set. And then another data set that I am forgetting about is regularly means several times a month.
Several times a month.
Yes.
So we're seeing when we go back to small business and restaurants, that people using a bike several times a month trumps the bringing back of restaurant and small business to this community. Ed, I hear what you're saying, but there are very few, and you're talking about citywide, there are very few protected bike lanes in Manhattan. They happen to be along 1st and 2nd Avenue, where I am in contact with many restaurant owners all the time, and especially between, I would say, 62nd and 72nd Street. I know all along those blocks, we asked for special dispensation to move the bike lanes around so these guys could have the use of the curbside for their restaurants, and we were summarily dismissed. So I can't speak to other boroughs, but we have been trying and trying. And I take issue with what you're saying about this neighborhood and DOT working with the restaurant owners. But secondly, I want to just discuss for a second the piece that you said about, sorry, I lost my thought for a second. It's just, these bike lanes are not, when do you come back and take a look at them? We have bike lanes on 71st and 70th. Has anybody done a study to see how many bikers are actually using them?
Yes, we have that data. I don't have that data on me
Okay,
right now.
can you please send that to us? I would be interested in seeing it. You talk
Sure.
about how these bike lanes can, and I'm sorry, Chuck, this will be my last question. You talk about how, one of the reasons for putting in these bike lanes is to guard pedestrians at the corners. I just point you to the corner, the north west corner of 72nd Street, where you have one of those little pedestrian areas. It's the most dangerous place for a pedestrian to stand as the bikes go straight through, right by the city bike station. You could be mowed down in a half a second there. So I take dispute with the fact that those things are supposed to be for the pedestrian. I really think that in this time, we have to help our restaurant owners. And I hope we will consider a motion tonight not to make the 61st and 62nd Street permanent, because I have seen nothing that makes me want to go there based on the data that we've seen. Thank you.
I just want to say one thing really quickly. I do believe that Kimberly Rancourt, who's on this call, did talk to the dialysis center. I know that was something that you talked about earlier.
I know, but once we've been talking about this for over 7 months now.
I know for a fact because Paula reports to me and I sign her timesheets that she's done a lot of overtime out there and been on the streets a lot, talking to a lot of people. All right, like I just want to point it out that we're not just going about this willy-nilly. I want to point that out. You know, we try really hard with the resources that we're given. So.
Okay, Lowell Barton. Next, Lowell.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. I want to talk about something a little bit different with the bike lanes, the construction of the bike lanes and the people who are working on those jobs and the contractors performing that work. New York City Mox this year came out with a hybrid, I'll call it a hybrid PLA that puts people in New York City to work first on our public taxpayer funded projects. It takes people from low wage zip codes, people that are grown up and living in housing projects, and putting them first, getting them the training by the unions to work in New York City and lift them out of poverty. Some of the agencies are the School Construction Authority. Every city-owned building uses it. DASNY, DDC, New York State DOT uses them, Port Authority, Health and Hospitals, Fire Department, and the list goes on. DOT does not use them. And what happens when you don't have them, you have a kind of race to the bottom type thing with contracting. We have a lot of contractors coming as far as Rockport, Mass, Connecticut, out in Denville, New Jersey. They're coming here non-union and they do not hire locally. I would like to see New York City DOT come up with a way to put New York City taxpayers, workers that are living with high unemployment rates into good career jobs and fixing our roads and raising the elevation of the people that live here in New York City. Also, I'd like to talk about the contractor that currently has the bike lane contract in New York City. From what I understand, looking at Checkbook New York City, they are non-compliant with the minority and women-owned business goals. It's like 30% on that contract. From what I see, they don't even have 5% on a lot of their contracts, and they have a lot of contracts and they're way behind. And I can't even see with the money left on that contract how they could possibly achieve it. Some of the minority businesses I know that work for them haven't gotten paid. Hopefully we could, take a good look at uplifting the workers and the contracting that are building these bike lanes. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you,
Lowell.
Lowell.
Won't go too far into it, but we've been using a lot more in-house resources. It's a good point, and I will take it back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted. Marco Tamayo, can we unmute Marco?
Can you hear me?
Yes. We hear you.
Thank you, Chuck. I would like to ask 3 questions, Chuck. Should I put it 3 questions directly, or should I put individually?
It's okay. You could do it however you want. You can ask.
Okay, I'm going to ask question by question. Okay. First of all, I believe that we need to create safe conditions for the bicyclists and the pedestrians. And I like the idea of Second Avenue bicycles, First Avenue bicycles. I think it's good. And many other crosses across the streets. However, Ed said, no one will be surprised, quote. So my first question to Ed is, you mentioned at 12, 13, 26, 29, 38, 56 streets. In one of these streets, can you explain to me and to the community, where do you find a free beach equal to the Queensboro Bridge with the same volume of traffic on the above mentioned streets? Even if you cannot demonstrate that, this is a baseless argument. This is a question for Ed. Please, this is my first question. Thank you.
So Marco and Ted and Paula can talk a little bit more about the numbers, and we're happy to share some of the analysis of those other projects. But looking at 38th and 39th Street, obviously you don't have a connection to a free bridge, but you are leading to a tunnel that experiences pretty, or two tunnels that experience very similar volumes over the course of it. And we're looking at the corridor as a whole, thinking through all of the different uses and how to accommodate deliveries and drop off and pickup. And when you look at it and through those lenses, the corridors do become very similar. So, we're happy to share some of the previous design presentations with you on those projects. And I think as you review those closely, you'd start to see some of the similarities on 6.1 and 6.2.
Completely disagree, because everybody is run to the Queensboro Bridge. Let me move to the second question.
Wait, can I just say really quickly?
Because I think I need to run with the time. The second question for you, Ed. You say change the design. What is the design, Ed? I didn't see any design. The only thing I can see is what Paula said, quote, illustration for an ambulance. No solution for the dialysis center, because there is no space for the ambulance. No input from the dialysis center. No solution for the child care center. Problems for the handicapped people parking. And by the way, before I continue, I'm a licensed architect. I'm a master's degree in urban planning too. So you know where I'm coming from. No solution for the open streets, open city streets. Let me tell you one thing. The restaurant industry creates $1 trillion to the national economy versus the bike line, which is only for recreation purposes. According with Manhattan, DOV Manhattan, 70% of the greenhouse emissions are from buildings, not from cars. So I think the question is, where is the design, Ed? And you are coming right here without no design? That is my second question.
Marco, we went through the design of the entire corridor, showing the width of the bicycle lane, showing the buffered treatment at many places along the way. But we will put that back up tomorrow. And if you have questions independently, you're happy to reach out to me and discuss it.
Okay. Finally, the third question. For those buildings owners that are in the sides of the bike line, and if you want to do, if those owners want to do any major alteration, where are you planning to put the construction containers? Are you going to stop the construction industry for those buildings? Those buildings,
Marco,
some of the buildings.
We don't
absolutely.
Sorry,
we don't stop construction. We have an Office of Construction Mitigation and Coordination. Whenever there is construction, it could change the use of the curb space. It could change travel lanes, bus lanes, bike lanes. Sometimes we're able to shift the bike lane out. Other times we have to shift the cyclists into a travel lane. It's all dependent on the particular location and on the particular job. But anytime any type of construction occurs within the right-of-way, they require a DOT permit, and we have a permit operation that analyzes the requests and imposes the appropriate stipulations.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And
Marco, it appears you accidentally muted yourself or something.
Yeah, that's okay. Why don't we go to Tricia Shimamura? Can we unmute Tricia?
Hey, everybody. So I think I've spoken about this before. I am a biker. Under DOT standards, I would be a regular biker. or a consistent biker. But I guess I'm really frustrated with this because I looked back, and in the last time we talked about this in January, the major kind of focus was the dialysis center. And as a social worker and a biker, I feel conflicted here. I thought that we were pretty clear the last time that we discussed this, that we were asking DOT to coordinate and work with dialysis center to come up with a plan. I'm frustrated to hear that the dialysis center was just recently reached out to, that they are telling us that they haven't been consistently engaged on this, that the plans for the center on the street have not been fleshed out in a meaningful way. It's just making it hard for me to support this. And honestly, I don't feel at this point that I can. I would like to see meaningful community engagement. And I don't doubt that the DOT staff has reached out to, I know you said dozens of residents on the area, but this is a major concern for a very vulnerable population. And I guess I'm frustrated to not hear that conversations have not gone farther with this entity on the street. If you can talk a little bit more about that, then I'm willing to hear it. And like I said, I'm eager to support a network that works for everybody, but I can't, I'm not sure why meaningful engagement hasn't happened here. I also just have a question about the data again, and forgive me, but can somebody from DOT clarify, are you actually using data that you gathered in the last year to make these decisions?
Ed, why don't DOT answer a few things on this? Talk about the dialysis center specifically, and I know the plans aren't final yet, and what you expect the final plans to look like, if you know, and then also Tricia's second question about the traffic counts and how you're using them. I know Ted said that you're not putting them up as the be all and end all, but why don't you flesh that out a little bit, both those issues?
Yeah, I guess
Paula, can you pull that up? Paula, can you pull up the diagram? Because it's actually the only plan view that we showed, which you and I have been talking about this for probably 4 or 5 months.
So
yeah,
before we even...
Are you talking about the dialysis center one, Ted?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it, I think there, yeah.
This is actually like, it's a diagram, and it's not a full plan, but we don't like to show those before they're actually signed by engineers, so you understand. But the fact is here, what we're saying is it will work similar to bus stops where the protected bike lane will end in front of the dialysis center. Ambulance will be able to get to the curb. We've made sure that there's enough space there that a cyclist can go around, somewhat like what we've done in front of the restaurants that were out before we put in these regs.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned before, unfortunately, we can't do markings in cold weather. They don't stick. So we haven't been able to make a lot of the changes that we would necessarily, but again, we'll continue to work with them and make the changes as soon as we can.
So Ted,
if we can just to elaborate a little bit on process as well, because I do understand that we haven't had that dialogue back and forth with the dialysis center at this point, but I think understanding that internally at DOT we have to go through a lot of different discussions with engineers, with signals division, with all different people at DOT internally to come up with what we think could actually be feasible. So there is a lot of back and forth in that. It does take time. This is one of many projects that our engineers are working on and reviewing. So I understand that you're looking to have those conversations or looking for us to have those conversations with the dialysis center, and we have committed to doing so. But it's not that we don't want to engage with them. It's that there is a process internally for us to develop these designs and options as well.
And just to add to Kimberly's point about the process, Tricia, this is a little bit different because we started with a temporary lane due to COVID recovery. In our standard project outreach process, the community board presentation is the kickoff. and we show a general concept and typical treatments for entire corridors. And then we drill down on the specifics. For example, when we move forward with 52nd and 55th Streets, we knew what the bones of the presentation and the proposal would be. And then we went out to the St. Regis and to the Peninsula Hotel, and we showed them exactly what we were thinking about for the designs along their frontage. That's absolutely what we're going to do with the dialysis center. That's what we're going to do with the daycare center. I've already committed to do it with the restaurants who have existing setups. So this is a little bit of a different process, I think, because it seems like the project outreach started last year when we were discussing the temporary lane. But tonight is the first time we're showing the community what a permanent proposal looks like for these corridors. And I will defend the fact that it's most appropriate to begin that conversation at the community board level. And it's what I do consistently with all of our projects.
I guess just a follow-up then question to that, and then to go back to the data, but the follow-up question to that is Chuck and Craig, is this proposal looking for a resolution tonight for us to support this, or where are we supposed to hear this again and pass a support or support for or against this, or what is our charge tonight for this?
I'll leave that to DOT. I mean, we haven't discussed with them whether they want a resolution or not at this point. Obviously, there's issues that I think we would want to, if we do, we want to reflect the issues of the restaurants and the dialysis center and et cetera. But Ed, you want to comment, Ed, at this point?
Chuck, as I mentioned earlier, we can't start implementation of this tomorrow, and we won't be able to for a while due to the weather. We always appreciate when we get a board's resolution of support. But really what's even more essential is that we're getting the feedback of what to focus on as we make a determination on whether to proceed and then finalize the individual details. Again, I'm happy to hear from the committee tonight on what they like, what they don't like, and what they think needs some extra work on.
I guess my biggest concern, and this goes to Chuck and Craig, and then I appreciate DOT answering the question about data, but my biggest concern is that if we don't pass a resolution and we just talk about this topic, and that then DOT, we go away for a couple months, the snow melts, things get warmer, and all of a sudden this becomes permanent, and we don't have another kind of shot at this until 12 months later when DOT evaluates again. And I think that that's a really long time. And I'm extremely sympathetic to the dialysis center and to the folks who need to access curbside here. As a biker, I say that I'm extremely sympathetic to the dialysis center here. So I guess that's my concern. And I like feel like I'm edging towards a type of resolution, but I'm gonna just cut to the chase here and say that I have a big problem supporting a project that hasn't fully engaged with our local residents on the block.
Yeah, I do think, Tricia, that we probably are looking to get some kind of a resolution for some of the reasons that you talked about, but I leave that to the committee. Obviously, and any resolution can certainly reflect issues that we feel have to be addressed. In terms of that our approval is, conditioned on some of these things being addressed, if indeed we do decide to approve.
I mean, I'm not leaning towards approval here, but I'm leaning towards like some sort of official statement that says a claim that identifies some of our concerns. But again, it goes back to, I would like to know that the dialysis center is meaningfully engaged and input is given, and that there's actual back and forth about what their needs are.
Well, let's see what the committee how the committee wants to handle this. We're only dealing with, I want to remind the public again, we're dealing with board members, since the public, we heard from the public before. And so the next person is Michelle Birnbaum, and can we unmute Michelle?
Yeah, thank you. 2 points. I'd like some clarification. Thanks to the DOT for being here. It's a long night, but I'm glad that you heard from the public once again. But a couple of clarifications that I need. It was my understanding that when we got these motorbikes and scooters and their capability was that they were able to go about 25 miles an hour, since that's the speed limit in the city, my understanding is that they were not supposed to be in the bike lanes, but that in fact they were supposed to be in the lanes of traffic, because after all, they are moving at the speed of traffic. So the first question is, can you clarify that? What's the rule?
I want Ed to speak to it because he's much better at following this stuff, but I believe that e-bikes that can go over a certain speed limit and have a hand throttle are supposed to be in a vehicular lane and are in fact, most of the time illegal. The problem where it gets a little bit confusing here is pedal assist bikes can be in the bike lane, but those should be stopped they should be capping out at like 17 miles per hour, I think. Ed?
Michelle, I have a chart that's available on our website, and I'm happy to send it to you and to Will so that he can disseminate it to other committee members. There are a variety of different classes of e-bikes and then mopeds. So in e-bikes, you can have class 1, class 2, class 3, and then mopeds, class A, B, C. Each of them have different limitations on their speed limit. I'm looking at the chart now, and any of the e-bike classes can ride in bike lanes as long as they are on streets with speed limits that are not greater than 30 miles an hour. If you are on a street without a bike lane, you are able to ride an e-bike in an otherwise travel lane, which is also true for a general bicycle. But happy to share that information with you so you can take a closer look.
Okay, so thank you, Ed. So the greater question, of course, is do these e-bikes and scooters and mopeds, do they know the rules? Because frankly, I'm sure they're not riding around with the readout from your website. So my understanding was that it's 25, there are no 30-mile-an-hour streets in the city anymore. So my understanding is that everything is 25 miles an hour. And to me, the classification of whether or not it's a bike or a scooter or this or that, the main issue is the 25 miles per hour. And any vehicle that has that capability should be in the line of traffic. So, but thank you for this chart. That's good, but I'm not so sure that the riders are as educated about this as, of course, you are at the DOT. So you might want to consider some additional outreach, or maybe posting signs like this, or whatever, that you could do. The other thing is you point to bike lanes, like you worked out a bike lane on a street like where the St. Regis is. What's that, 53rd Street? Yes, you worked it out. 50s. You worked it out. That's true. You worked it out. But I can guarantee you that if you spoke to the St. Regis, they couldn't be more unhappy that the bike lane is there. I have ridden on that block, and when people constantly pull into the St. Regis and they have cars for hire and pick up and drop off, that bike lane going right past them is a particularly dangerous and annoying thing. So my other concern, and my last concern, is really a PR thing. I always get the feeling, and I really appreciate all of you being here tonight from the DOT. This is after hours for you, and I understand that it takes a lot of time and effort, and I appreciate that. However, my feeling, and this has been for many, many years, is that what the DOT does, and you don't set policy, but to me, it always feels like a PR issue. I know that legally, whatever you want to put into place, whatever plan you have to legally present it to the community. And I have always felt time after time that the community, we get presented for everything. Usually it's under the basis that it's temporary and that you're going to consider a permanent solution if it'll become permanent down the line. And I can probably count on one hand the number of times that a temporary implementation didn't turn into a permanent solution, no matter what the community says. So I have no doubt that you're in earnest, that you're going to address the dialysis center, that you're going to address all the things that are brought up by the community. But what the conclusion will be, that none of those concerns will outweigh the plan that the DOT has already implemented and has a vested interest in seeing through. That's my concern. I won't support these bike lanes temporary. I didn't want them there to start with. I won't support them continuing temporary. I won't support them being permanent. I think it's a disservice to think that and I've said this over all the years, it's not accurate to think that we are going to turn into a primarily biking city. That's just not how commerce is carried on. And we've made no accommodations for much more important vehicular traffic that does have something to do with commerce. But thanks very much. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for the clarification. I hope you can do some more outreach to the motorbiking community to get those laws into everybody's hands. Thank you.
Hey, sorry, if we can go back to the data question just really quickly, I just wanted to answer that. We're not using data that we collected during COVID to make any decisions. We do have historical data. The only reason why I showed those graphs is because we are monitoring traffic in those corridors and many other places. So we monitor, but those decisions are not based on the data that we collected during COVID.
One of the reasons why we were able to do this as a temporary lane is that this plan was already in the works and we had already collected data and started to look at what the traffic numbers were.
Michelle, I guess I just want to make a comment on what you said generally, because I've been a co-chair of this committee for quite a while and have obviously worked with DOT on a lot of things. And there are obviously plenty of times when there's some things that comes down from on high and it's very hard to change and you can't really get anywhere. And I think, that's been on the table and we are aware of that. But there have been many times also when dealing with a lot of the people who are on this call today, where, that's Ed and Ted and others, when we've had issues that they've tried to accommodate with and they've made a good effort to accommodate with. So I don't think it's always that it's just a public relations move that they come here. And I think that I'm speaking for, I think I can speak for the committee as one, as I said, who's been the co-chair for quite a long time, that we appreciate the efforts to where DOT does what it can. They're under certain constraints also, and sometimes they don't make the policy, but I do think that they have listened over the years to concerns that we've had and tried the best to do what they could about it. Now there's things they can't do, but I think that's just the way I see it based on my experience with DOT and working with them, for many years. Let me go to Billy Freeland now. Billy, can we unmute Billy?
Thanks. I know it's been a long night and I'll try to keep this relatively brief, but I want to bring this back
We're just getting going. We're just getting going.
Chuck, some of us have an early bedtime around here, but look, let's bring this back to basics. 6 years ago, this board said, we want comprehensive bike network. And that includes crosstown lanes. We've seen lanes go in at 70th and 71st. We've seen lanes go up at 78th and 79th. We've seen lanes in the 90s. We don't have any in the 80s and we don't have any in the 60s. We have neighbors who, to allude to an earlier comment, commute from Queens, ride here they come here for dinner from Queens. I have a friend who just told me he was a little bit offended about a comment that was made earlier. He does eat dinner on the Upper East Side. He lives in Sunnyside. We have delivery cyclists who deliver back and forth Manhattan, Queens, and other boroughs in the city. And, so much of this is conspicuously absent from this discussion. And this is a safety issue. I do ride as well. And it is, for those who don't, it makes sure you feel immeasurably safer to have a protected bike lane. And for those who question, well, is ridership, where it ought to be? I don't see enough bikes. Well, I've biked down 61st and 62nd, and I can't tell you how many times there's an obstruction in the way of those lanes. There's, during the snowstorm, I've seen those lanes not be plowed. So look, we have to take very seriously as a city how we're going to keep these lanes unobstructed and how we're going to encourage people to cycle more. But if this board is serious about a crosstown, a network of crosstown and uptown, downtown bike lanes, then I think it's somewhat disingenuous of us to, punt this, even further. I take very seriously the concerns of the dialysis center. I saw the presentation tonight. The diagram was compelling to me, but I think as a board, we all want DOT to work with the dialysis center in particular to make sure that that this accommodates the ambulettes. It's obviously a very serious issue, but I just think, for us to, pass a resolution tonight saying these lanes are inappropriate would really be inconsistent with the values we've laid out over the years, saying we need crosstown bike lanes. And so DOT was asked about this. They said, look, we looked at other streets in the 60s, and for all these reasons, they do not work. And I think this is maybe the most important point. If we tried to do this on 63rd Street, 60th Street, 64th Street, we would be back here having the same exact conversation and slowing this down, even further. So look, I support these lanes. I do think they should be made permanent. It seems like there's not an appetite, unfortunately, on the board to have that discussion. But I think the closer we get to actually adopting this plan, the more we're going to, I think, accommodate everyone, because I looked at this plan. It's not just about making these lanes permanent. It's about finding ways to accommodate residents on 61st Street and 62nd Street, working with the dialysis center. It seems like it's an improvement from that perspective on the current temporary condition. So I hope we'll all, keep that in mind, tonight as we think about this. And I want to thank, everyone who participated in the conversation. It's important to have, these types of discussions, and thank DOT for, taking this seriously. Very last quick point. In a way, we can all agree on this. We have to think comprehensively about traffic in this neighborhood. And the fact that it was talked about how there's illegal there's placard abuse, there's no enforcement of trucks that are using 61st and 62nd, that you have, other issues that are enforcement related. Yes, let's, have that discussion. Let's have loading zones on these streets as appropriate. Let's have, for hire vehicle drop-off spaces. That's something we can work with DOT on, I hope, and that will ease the traffic conditions. But I don't think it's realistic for us to say, we can't have crosstown bike lanes. We need them. It's a safety issue. And I hope we'll reflect that tonight as a board. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig, I know you wanted to say some things. Craig?
Yes, thanks, Chuck. First, I just had a few questions, then a couple of comments. So in terms of the dialysis center, I know we are talking about the ambulette parking, but would any signage there also permit pickup and drop off for anyone who's coming or arriving by personal vehicles or taxis or ride shares? Just want to make sure we're not just limiting it to ambulettes, because obviously not everyone arrives via an ambulette.
Yes. All vehicles would be able to get to the curb and use it to board for egress.
Yeah, the signage would indicate that.
Yes, I mean, we basically have the same regulation that they had before, which I believe it says ambulette parking, but all other vehicles were always allowed, and there's really, so all other vehicles would be allowed for drop off and pick up.
Okay, great.
It's essentially a no standing regulation for all other vehicles except for ambulettes who are able to park there. So you could get in and out of a taxi there. You could not park your personal car there to unload groceries.
Right. So as long as there's the ability for, if there is an ambulette parked there, for another vehicle to be able to do a drop off at the same time, I think I would feel good about it. And then just Ed, you keep on talking about the season for putting down lane markings. What is the time frame for potential implementation beyond just when the weather warms up and you can put in the stripings and the paint?
I think that's still TBD as we're determining our work plan for 2021. Obviously, we think a real benefit to the permanent proposal is that it will be able to accommodate some of the concerns that we've heard throughout the corridor by taking away the very simple temporary marked lane and installing a more nuanced design. So I think we would like to move forward with good speed here, but it's not a project that will be implemented by the end of this month. So I would, if I had to ballpark it, I would probably say spring, summer, but we're still a ways away from being done.
All right. And then in terms of data, I just want to get back to that. And as someone speaking here who spends much of my day analyzing transportation data professionally, the way I'm looking at this is, I know obviously it's generally not advisable to collect data when times are not normal, or if there are special events or things that are taking place that would create abnormal or anomalies in data. But in this case, isn't it the case that traffic levels have largely recovered to pre-pandemic levels, and even if they're not quite 100% on a consistent basis, they're very close?
Yes, especially
yes.
around bridges. And this bridge does appear to be roughly the same. However, the timing is different. The peak hours aren't quite as severe. It's actually, in some cases, I can't speak to this bridge specifically, but we're actually seeing more volume get across because there's less peak period. The peak ends up stretching out 4 or 5 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
does that answer? It's a little bit nerdy, but I think it's an answer that works for you.
Right. And then the other piece of it is, since you were showing the graphics regarding 61st and 62nd compared to 63rd and 64th, isn't it the case that if there were adverse impacts on 61st and 62nd Street, even if we're comparing it using the data in the recent months during the pandemic, that we'd be able to see the behaviors of the trend lines differently on 61st and 62nd Street because of the bike lanes? So even if it's not original data collection in that same sense, and we're a little suspicious of it because it's during this time frame, we'd still be able to see the impact of a bike lane if there were really adverse, serious impacts to traffic if we compared it to 63rd and 64th Street, which had no bike lanes installed.
Yes, that is why that's there. Paula, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. That's exactly why we also got data for 63rd and 64th. If there's any abnormal anything, we use that as a control, use that as our base to compare to 61, 62. So yes, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, and I guess what I want to say is that, first of all, I want to echo what Chuck was saying, and I want to thank you and commend you for all the effort that you're putting in terms of ongoing and continued outreach. And I understand that there are individuals and many speakers tonight who may feel unheard or feel as if they're not getting the responses that they were hoping to get. But I do really sincerely believe that DOT, all you guys are really doing your best trying to work with everyone to the fullest extent possible, and that this is an ongoing discussion and dialogue, and that even if something gets put into place permanently and isn't working, you're going to be responsive towards it. And I know there's been a history of doing that. But I just want to make the point that we shouldn't confuse ongoing efforts with the expectation that everyone's individual concerns are going to be addressed to the extent that they may wish it could be. That's unfortunately just not how the world works or government works. I do believe that DOT is taking the concerns of the community seriously, and here as a board, we're certainly working to try to make sure that we're having everyone have the opportunity to speak. We did not want or necessarily anticipate a 3+ hour discussion, but I think it speaks to the fact that we really do want everyone to have their voices heard, and I hope everyone who's still here feels that we're achieving that. I do. And I also just want to speak to, I know there's been a lot of discussion about small businesses and open restaurants. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, I feel better knowing that if there are parking lanes that that are going to be in place, as long as this temporary parking, open restaurants program is in place where restaurants can use the bike lane. I didn't, at the beginning of this pandemic, know how it was going to work on 2nd Avenue. I was particularly worried about businesses on the east side of 2nd Avenue really being at a disadvantage compared to those on the west side because of the presence of the bike lane or even the bus lane. And I've seen how it works, and I've seen the restaurants, even with the bike lane present, thriving in terms of their outdoor seating. So I have real optimism that that's going to be the case here. I also want to echo Billy in terms of what he was saying in terms of loading zones and things of that nature. I know there are tools in the DOT toolkit or toolbox in terms of different types of signage and different strategies that you could have to help people have access to the curb front. And I really do hope to see that as the plan continues to evolve. And then I just want to say, no bike lane is going to be entirely devoid of adversely impacting some group or stakeholder, but I truly believe, as a member of this community and as a professional transportation planner, that this is the best plan given the policies that are being implemented in terms of prioritizing bike infrastructure and building out a bike network and ultimately a more sustainable city. There is no ideal location in the low 60s, but if you're going to be mapping out a bike network, this is a different situation from, say, the other bike lanes that you've put in on one-way streets north of Houston Street, because no other street has a bridge filtering in bikers coming from another borough, and it's the only place that really is an option, because people obviously don't bike in the tunnels, in the Midtown Tunnel or the Lincoln Tunnel. So I think we have to look at it from that perspective, that this is, you may think that this is a not ideal place for it, but comparatively, it makes sense. And I really feel confident that this is going to work, and I support this plan, obviously hoping that it could be improved upon as we move forward and address, and to see it address as many of the concerns as possible, even if we can't achieve a 100% satisfaction for everyone.
Thank you, Greg. Rebecca Lamort, I think, is next. Rebecca, can we unmute Rebecca?
Hi, thank you. I'll be quick since it's late. I just wanted to speak to the issues raised around accessibility. I support crosstown bike lanes. I support protected bike lanes. To me, it's about cyclists and pedestrian safety. And also, as someone that drives in the city and is physically unable to bike because of my disability, it's also about making sure cars know where bikes are as well, so they can see them with the turns and everything. But I'm concerned about hearing from our neighbors that with disabilities that rely on cars and access to the curb, that they'll be impacted by these bike lanes on these streets. So before moving forward, I would like to see DOT engage in some very specific conversations around how it will impact seniors in our community, how it's going to impact accessibility needs, disabled New Yorkers in the community, because like Craig was just saying, yes, people will be, impacted by this no matter what happens, but too often people with disabilities, mobility impairments, older neighbors, their needs are overlooked, and it's important extra so that we center their voices in this conversation. So before moving forward on anything tonight, I would want DOT to go back and have very specific conversations and reach out to people that specifically spoke on this meeting tonight about issues with accessibility and their personal concerns about what these bike lanes could have for them. And that being said, again, I'm supportive of the bike lanes, but before we move forward on anything, I just want to hear more about what's going to be done to be sure any impacts on that community is going to be worked on or worked through to the best of our ability, because there will still be impacts negatively, unfortunately, but there are ways to definitely make it more palatable for people in our community. Thank you.
Thanks. Felice Farber is next. Can we unmute Felice?
Thank you. And I'll be quick. I want to thank DOT for your time tonight and for really trying to think through everybody's issues. I know it's a difficult issue. Having crosstown bike lanes are critically important, and I support that. There were a number of important issues raised by the community tonight, and I think addressing those critical issues thoroughly the dialysis center, and as Rebecca just said, making sure the needs of the disabled and the elderly are addressed so that we can have crosstown bike lanes, but we can do it safely and manage the issues in the community. But I just wanted to thank you for your continued efforts to address the issues of the community and make sure this is done safely and thoughtfully.
Thank you, Felice. Jack Zimmerman.
Yeah,
Jack.
I'm probably going to become one of the most hated people in this Zoom, but it's okay. My term ends at the end of the month, so congratulations.
We're not going to hate you at all.
But anyway, I also fully support protected bike lanes across the city, including here. I understand that it's controversial. I understand the concerns that everyone here has proposed, and my support is contingent on that the DOT listens to all the members of the community and their concerns. But I think we've all seen that when there's no pandemic, the congestion in the city and all cities across this country and the world are congested, and it has huge economic impact. The city loses billions of dollars every year due to congestion, and I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of congestion and not being able to get around this great city. So I think bike lanes are a solution to that. I think just leaving things how they are with all the lanes being for cars is not a solution to this congestion problem we have and the climate problem we have. So again, I support the protected bike lanes. It is contingent though on the fact that the DOT does listen to the community's concerns, but I do support this and future protected bike lanes around the city.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, I guess the question is whether or not we want to take up anything at this meeting. You know, getting a sense from people that they may want to wait to see what happens with some of the issues that have been raised. You know, the dialysis center and the restaurants and some of the others. And I don't know when you're going to have. I could address this to Ed and Ted and Paula. When you're going to have plans firmed up where you could come back and tell us what you're doing to deal with all of those issues. I think I would put them in three categories. Maybe there are more, but dialysis center being one, restaurants being two, and I think the question of people with disabilities also being three. And I don't know if there's any other broader category that people want to put in that. But when do you think you'll have plans firmed up on those? Let's start with those three, unless anyone else wants to add to that. And maybe Ed or Ted or Paula could give us a sense on the time.
I'll speak to number one. Oh, sorry.
Ted, let me go first, and you could add some color.
Sure.
First of all, I think those are buckets, and we also will go back to our colleagues and share some of the. I think if there's a fourth bucket, it's about congestion and how this plan would perhaps deteriorate what existed previously. I think we tried to give the best data we have, or best information we have tonight. Let us go back to our colleagues if there's additional information we could provide that might make folks more comfortable on that front too. We're happy to do it. I hesitate to give a specific timeline because I don't know, and some of this is just dependent on larger operations throughout the borough and the city. But of course, we would keep the committee and the board up to date on all of our next steps, and we're happy to come and give an update on some of our conversations with individual stakeholders, including the dialysis center, as we make some progress on those individualized designs in the weeks to come.
Ed, do you think by next
does that sound right?
Meeting you might have, or Ted, anybody wants to answer?
Yeah, I would say it helps us to get a little bit of a direction, which we're getting from you guys, and we can finalize the drawing and start working with people on it. I would say by the end of the month. It's always hard to play phone tag with people, so I don't want to get too far ahead of it. We would want to have those conversations individually, I believe. I think that's probably smarter than at a community board level with the actual drawings in our hands.
Why don't we look to have you come back at our next meeting when that's the first Wednesday in April. I don't know if anybody has their calendar handy, what day that is exactly. I mean, what date, I'm sorry, not day, it's Wednesday.
April 7th.
April 7th. So, all right, so that's that's over a month away. So hopefully, why don't we shoot for that, and we'll have some, and we'll try to then, I think, come up with a resolution on this matter. So we can, because we'd like.
That sounds good to us.
Say something, and we appreciate everybody coming here and spending all this time. And I want to give Barry Schneider, he had his hand up, so I wanted to give Barry Schneider, one of my former co-chairs, the last word on this particular.
Well, good evening, Chuck. Good evening, all. Thank you so much for a very enlightening evening. I wanted to, Chuck, what you were saying just now is what I was going to suggest, that we ask them to respond to the particular issues that were raised this evening and come back next month. And since it's on 7th of April, it gives them a full week after April Fool's Day to come back with a satisfactory set of conclusions. Thank you very much. Ed and team, thank you very much for your continued support. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody, by the way, for good participation. And, a lot of people came out, a lot of people had comments, and I think the DOT was going to respond to those comments, and we'll get those responses next month, and we'll move ahead on this one way or another. But thank you, Ed and Ted and Paula and Kimberly. We appreciate you all coming and spending your evening with us, when I know there are much better things you could have done, like deal with children. And congratulations to Ed on the twins. Okay, then why don't we go to our next, by the way, I just want to announce, I don't know, did someone want to say something, Ed? Were you saying? No? Okay.
No, I just wanted
to announce
in the committee.
And I was going to say, just Chuck, as you're about to announce the next agenda item, do we want to consider even deferring that, because it's now 10 o'clock, and I don't know if anyone from DOT wants to even spend 5 minutes talking about the bike parking program.
How about we do the 30-second update, and we can share more information next month. But obviously the mayor and Commissioner Goldman have announced that we want to proceed with more bike parking, and we should have more details in the weeks to come.
Okay, thank you, Ed. I wanted to mention that we were going to have a presentation from Sam Schwartz Engineering about this, but Sam had limited time, and as we saw this was going to be going on quite a bit longer, at 8 o'clock, we got back in touch with him, and we rescheduled him for next month because as we went a little beyond what we thought. But we were discussing an important subject, and a lot of people wanted to be heard, and I hope we're heard. Okay, then I think is there any old business or new business? Well, hearing none, then I think
you have hands up from 3 people for older and new business. 4 people.
I have. All right, an old business. If it's an old business item, I see someone from the public, Andrew Fine. And why don't we unmute Andrew?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. On old business, which would really be the last topic regarding the 61st and 62nd Street crosstown bus lanes. I think
that's really not old business, Andrew. We're done with that for this time. We're going to discuss it next.
I'm sorry, I had my hand up for 2 hours, so it's old business to me. But
you had your hand up, but we recognized everyone, and when I said that we were not going to recognize anyone any further, that's why you weren't called on. And so we're not going to talk about old business tonight. We've talked about it since let's see, Ben Kalos took 15 minutes. So since 6:45, it is now almost 10 o'clock. We've talked about it. We're not talking about that any further tonight. And
okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm awfully sorry about that. I thought that
coming back next April.
If you want to talk about new business, I have some new business.
Talk about new business. Okay. Talk about new business.
the new business that I would like to bring up is the proliferation of Dutch Express trucks unloading and distributing on sidewalks and in the streets of the Upper East Side on a regular basis, 2 and 3 lanes into traffic. I'd like the community board to take a stand on this. It's a obstruction. It blocks the sidewalks, it blocks the streets, it causes congestion, it causes pollution, and Amazon could clearly find loading docks. They could distribute their or sort their products in a warehouse somewhere. The streets are not their warehouse. And I'd like to solicit opinion from the community board on what they think should be done in regards to sorting on the street by the part, like the likes of Dutch Express, Amazon, and Fresh Direct. Thank you.
Yeah, we've actually had that, and we've been trying to get those companies to come here, and where we could discuss ways to do that, and we're gonna continue to do that, and we'll Bright Bill, our board heads the board. We're gonna try to get those people in, and we'll see if we can come up with something, and if not, we'll invite some of the traffic enforcement and other people also here to see what's what. So we'll pursue that. That's an issue that's been raised before, and we haven't. We've been so busy with actually starting this year with a number of other issues, we haven't had a chance to really work them in, but we will, because I know it's a continuing problem. So thank you.
And Chuck, can I speak to that very quickly?
Yes, of course, Will.
Okay. As far as Fresh Direct and Amazon go, we know that they're, Amazon in particular, they just move around. As soon as we talk to the 19th precinct and we talk to Amazon and ask them to move, they move somewhere else, and they're an inconvenience to somebody else. That's just the game. So if you tell me where they are, we reach out to them and get them to move pretty quickly. So just tell me locations is the main thing. And for Fresh Direct, we work with Fresh Direct from time to time, and the precinct to get them to move to a different location that's better for the neighbors, better for whatever situation. So again, tell me locations. We can negotiate with them, and we'll figure that out. You have my email, Andrew. So.
Yeah. Andrew, get in touch with Will. That's helpful. We'll appreciate it. Michelle, you had a old or new business? Michelle Burnham.
Yeah, 2 questions. Number 1, has the fairway signs that we voted on, if they're not up yet, do we have any idea when?
No, I'm glad you asked about that. No, the answer to that is no. We haven't heard back from them on that. However, we did get something from Fairway. And
that's exciting.
It is exciting. We got their attention, and someone sent something in, which Will passed on to me, and said, this is an entity that just took it over from bankruptcy last year. And they said they heard about this, and they want to know what they can do about it and how they can help. So and we had some email traffic about this earlier, and I said to Will that we're going to send them a letter, and we're going to say detailing what the problems have been, and we're going to ask for commitments from the CEO to do better on this.
And they can also start by accepting our invitation to come to a meeting. Yes. That would be step number 1.
We're going to point out to them that in more elegant language that the store manager blew us off.
Exactly. So I hope they do come, and I hope it's on a night where we really can make time. Right. The second question is on this bike rack New City program. Is the community going to have input as to the locations of these?
They're going to come and explain more of that. I think, I'm not sure what's going to be how they're doing that. It was just sort of introduced. I don't know, maybe Craig knows a little bit more, but I don't know at this point what's out there, except for they just said they want to start this program, and I'm not
because they came up with a specific amount. I mean, who proposed this? And they've made
No,
a
I think-
decision that it's 10,000 spots that they want. So, you know, will we have some input into that?
That was
What do you think?
that was my hope to, by putting this on the agenda, that we would be able to have a little bit of an understanding as to what they're looking to do with it and whether there's any input that we would be able to provide in terms of directing it to specific areas and not having it just be, okay, here's the program and here's how it's going to be put into place.
So here's my concern for the April agenda. Already I'm seeing that it could be an agenda, especially if you moved Sam's presentation to April as well. It seems to me it's going to be another 11 o'clock agenda because you're having big items if you're bringing the bike lanes back and the Schwartz presentation and the overview of the bike parking racks and Fairway. I just think that we're really going to have to put a timeline on those agenda items so that we can actually get them all in.
Well, you know, I think we're going to have to look at that agenda for April and see if that works. Now that we have, you know, the 61st and 62nd bike lanes coming back. I may be out of town that day. But I think
you may want to be, right?
Right.
Anyway, so I think we have to carefully look at that, and maybe if we are putting it all on the agenda, maybe the public commentary could be limited to 1 minute a person, since we've heard from a lot of people.
It's hard to do. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Since this has been heard and
Right.
we heard, but I think we'll have to figure. We'll put our heads together on the agenda and see what happens. And I don't know what we'll do with Sam. We may have to put that off. We'll see. But yeah, we'll think about that, Michelle. Absolutely.
Yeah, but we all want to avoid another 3.5 hour marathon discussion of this topic. And I think now that we've had the main discussion, I think we could hopefully keep it more focused next month. And especially if there are people who have already spoken, maybe we only have new speakers that have the longer time to speak, unless there's a specific concern that, like, we wouldn't want to limit the dialysis center, but others, if they've already said it and don't have anything new to add, then it would not be a good use of anyone's time.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll deal with that. Now, I hesitate to, but this is Cos Spagnoletti. I know what he wants to say. Go ahead, Cos.
No, I sent you and Craig an email earlier on, but I'm not going to be, we've spent enough time. I've sent you, Craig, and Russell and Will an email of what I would like. So I'm not going to do any more tonight. This is on the sidewalks.
We'll add it to next month's agenda on top of everything else.
Okay, thanks. Well, it may not need to.
No, I don't think it needs to be added. I think we
could
do
just
it
be a letter to DOT.
Yeah, I was kidding. I think we could definitely do that.
No, but it could just be a letter rather than, a full-blown, time-consuming item.
Right.
Yes.
So let's see. Peter Borak seems to have the unenviable position of being the last person keeping us here. Go ahead, Peter.
It'll be very, very, very brief. I just want to say 3 things. First of all, Chuck and Craig, I think you guys did a great job with this meeting tonight. I think this is one of our tougher meetings, and I think you guys handled it well. That's number 1. Number 2 is I just want to thank the DOT folks. They're public servants, and they spent 3.5 hours tonight with us, and that's I think that should be commendable. The final thing to say is just we live in this age of just incessant fighting in all of our different levels of government, corruption at all levels. Nothing seems to work right. And obviously with these bike lanes, someone's going to be upset, but it was extremely refreshing to hear everyone kind of just say what their views were in a respectful way. I don't know. This is the most uplifting meeting I've actually think we've had in 5-6 years I've been on the committee. The most uplifting governmental or political meeting or body or issue I've actually thought about. So I'm actually a big fan of bike lanes, but that's irrelevant. I just want to say thanks to the community for showing up and just voicing their opinions, pro or con. And I think we should be proud of ourselves. I don't know. That's all.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate what you have to say, but you might need, I think you've been in too long. In the house too long, I mean. But that's all right. I think it was a good discussion. I agree with you. Billy Freeland, I thought you were going to be asleep already.
How could I sleep through this? Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Without objection, and thank everybody. Motion to adjourn. We'll see everybody. Everybody on April 7th. Well, before that, the community board members, we have 2 other meetings here.